Supervisors for Monday, August 31, 2026 into order. And have roll call the old way, right?
Well, I am aware that Bob Anderson mentioned he is not able to come, and I see Jamie McCready is not here. Am I missing anyone else?
Okay, so we've got 27 of the 29 present.
Correct. And I don't believe anyone is online, Lance? Lance? Nobody's
Maybe
online?
Okay. All right. And public notification, are we good? Jess?
Dana was going to lead invocation.
No,
first.
public notification.
Public notification, everything was noticed according to Wisconsin open meeting laws.
Okay. And the invocation, our Supervisor Heller?
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together today in fellowship and service. We ask that you grant us your divine wisdom to make decisions that are not just important for us, but for our families, our neighbors, and all the constituents of Barron County. As we discuss the future of data centers in our community, we ask for the spiritual discernment to navigate complex information. Help us weigh the technological and economic choices before us with a spirit of stewardship, ensuring we protect the resources and community you have entrusted us in care. Guide our speech, open our minds, and help us act in a way that honors our responsibilities and glorifies you. We ask this through you, Lord, and your Son, Jesus Christ, and all together, all God's people said, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dana. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Special matters and announcements?
Yes, county board members, you know that there is a special meeting of the West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission on Tuesday, the 29th of September, $25 charge to go. You can either please pay that and put it on your timesheet. We'll pay you when we pay your payroll. Please, if you can attend that, it's going to be on data centers. I believe it's going to be Mr. O'Connell will be there as well. Highly recommend you attend that to learn as much as you can. That's the only thing I have, sir.
Okay, number 5, approve the agenda. Motion by Supervisor Olson, second by Supervisor Cook. Any concerns with the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion's carried. I'm going to move off my seat and go and sit next to Pete and Dennis in a minute here. But I just wanted to let you know, there is no vote today. It's, the earliest we'll be voting is probably October board meeting. Today is information only. And today, and then what Jeff just referenced, September 29th down in Eau Claire. And what we're trying to do is educate the Board of Supervisors so we can make the best decision for the residents of Barron County. Yes, there's going to be a time when we're going to have public comment, but today I just wanted to try to educate the board, and also the same thing on the 29th. So that's it. All I've got to say, and I'm going to move back into not the galley. But.
No. If you have problems registering with that online link with West Central Regional Planning, I know some of you have, please just give them a call. Mr. Chairman, what would be in order now is this would be, a member should say, I move that the assembly go into I move that the assembly go into a committee of the whole to consider a data center moratorium. That would be the proper motion.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Cook, second by Supervisor Bukowski. Is there any concerns with doing that? That's why we're here. All in favor of going into the committee of the whole, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. So we're in the committee of the whole, and I'm now out in the assembly, and Jeff's running the meeting.
Okay. I want to take a little time to talk about what a committee of the whole does, what it affords members, and why you see color coding in front of you. So first of all, apologize for that. It does not limit debate, and it also allows supervisors to talk across to one another. That's what a committee of the whole does. And so it doesn't in a normal meeting, a legislative body, for example, Supervisor Bukowski would only be able to speak to an item twice. That is why we have a committee of the whole, so that you can ask questions multiple times. What I've done is I've split the county board up into red, white, and blue teams. I did that based on some reading I did underneath Robert's Rules of Order. And what that allows me as chairman to do is I will ask the red committee, what do you have for questions? So in this instance, if Supervisor Bukowski has a question, he asks a question. Then the red committee members, other ones ask questions. Then we go on to the white and the blue, allowing people each a representative amount of time to ask questions. I made a point about cross-referencing. In a meeting, legislative body, you address all things to the chair. When you're in committee of the whole, for example, Supervisor Patty Anderson could say to Supervisor Vaughn, Supervisor Vaughn, you asked this question. Could you just please give me a little bit more information so I understand what the basis of that question was? Then you can give that information and solicit another question. That's the purpose of the committee of the whole. So there are some prohibited actions. You're not going to make any motions. You can make recommendations to the assembly. You cannot alter or change the scope. So we're not going to talk about large-scale solar. We're not going to talk about the Vikings have another losing season, and the Packers win in the Super Bowl. We're not going to discipline anybody. I'd prefer that you cannot generally use or table anything, and I'd ask you to do that. So at this time, so that we're on the record and in keeping with Robert's Rules of Order, I'm going to place the statement of business. The statement of business for the Barron County Board of Supervisors going into a committee of the whole on Monday, August 31st, 2026 at 1 p.m. is for the Barron County Board of Supervisors to receive information from Mr. Mark O'Connell, the President and CEO of Wisconsin Counties Association, and Rebecca Roker from Atolis Law to discuss the possibility and receive information on a moratorium for data mining centers. So with that, I am now going to turn over the mic to Mr. O'Connell, let him make a presentation. When he is done, then we're going to allow questions from the board. And so please take a piece of paper, write something down, then we'll take questions at that time. So Mark, with that, I'll let you go.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good to see my friends in the Barron County Board once again. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this meeting. Data centers is not just the issue of the day in Barron County or in Northwest Wisconsin or in Wisconsin as a whole. It is the issue of the day in the country. Really, quite frankly, most of the civilized world. It is the issue, and it's not going away. Artificial intelligence is not going away, and therefore data centers is not going away. So we will be dealing with this issue as a nation and as states and as communities for quite some time to come, or at least until some other technology comes along that supersedes the need for data centers. You have asked me to participate in this meeting to talk about where we are as a state and provide you with some factual information, which, quite frankly, there is a lot of information available out there on data centers. Some of it is factual, some of it is hyperbole, some of it is manufactured. Some of it is outright false, but there's a lot of it out there, and it's hard to discern exactly what is true and what is not. People have opinions on data centers. There is no right or wrong. Everyone's entitled to an opinion on a data center. But here today, I'm going to relay to you what I know of the data center situation in Wisconsin, and then we'll go through some of the pros and cons of data centers. And then we'll talk about some of the fears and critiques of data centers and which ones are legitimate. And I've categorized whether some of the fears are truly legitimate, moderately legitimate, or really not legitimate at all. And then you need to do what you think is best for Barron County. And again, there is no right or wrong. I think, let me start off with this. As we walk through this conversation, Part of what we need to keep in mind, in my opinion, as your staff person for multiple decades, is what our role is as local government policymakers. And I say that not just as county board, but our city, town, and village friends as well. Our role, our responsibility is to create a framework and a structure of laws, rules, regulations, ordinances, such that our citizens and our businesses can conduct their affairs with a sense of reliability and trust that we are moving in a direction, that an issue has been well thought out and reasoned, and that they can conduct their affairs if they abide by the laws, rules, and regulations that have been well thought out by a governing body. We might even toss in the state in that regard. Now, the state has not passed laws on data centers yet. Many counties, most counties, almost all counties, have not passed laws on data centers. But our role as local government officials is to create that structure and framework, not necessarily to pick and choose winners. And I want to lay a base, sort of a base premise on this. We set the boundaries, but we don't determine who can win or lose within those boundaries. For example, it's really not our role to say we're going to allow large structures to occur, like warehouses, to occur in a particular geographic area. We're going to allow CVS, but we're not going to allow Walgreens. That would be picking a winner and loser. We're going to allow Walmart, but we're not going to allow Amazon. That would be picking winners and losers. If both abide by the laws, rules, and regulations that we have set up in our structure and framework, then they should be able to conduct business if they abide by those laws, rules, and regulations. And if they do not, then they need to abide by the legal system. The legal system will play its role. And there may be penalties, perhaps suspension of activity, possibly even up to termination of that activity, whether that's a business or an individual citizen if they violate the rules of society as you as a county, city, town, village, or state have so determined. But that's our role. The reason we have it that way is because the citizens and our businesses, our communities need some sense of reliability that we are not going to shift from one end of the spectrum to the other based on the whims of an individual body. Let me give you an example. And it will be a ludicrous example. If we made public policy based on our whims of picking winners and losers and what we felt, for example, and let's use data centers, I guess, because it's the issue of the day as an example. If we didn't really know what data centers, what we liked or disliked about them, but we had this inner feeling that we didn't like them, so we're opposed to them, even though we maybe didn't necessarily know why. And we took action to say, no data centers. Well, we'd be picking a winner and a loser because we're saying other large operations who might abide by laws, rules, and regulations are okay, but this data center operation who might be abiding by the same laws is not okay, based on our feelings. But what would happen if the next governing body, county board, city council, village, town, whoever, if that county board or city council or village said, you know, I like a lot of older people in my community. I really don't like children. We're gonna ban childcare centers. Well, that's ludicrous and ridiculous, and really quite, just super ridiculous. But that would be picking a winner and a loser. Completely ridiculous. But we can't have that. It would be, that's unreliable to the citizens, to our businesses. We'd be creating a scenario where the county board or city council or village council after that would say, we're going to fix that. And then we'd have a society where we'd move from one end of the spectrum to the other constantly, every time there's an election. And quite frankly, the elections would occur because there'd be recalls all the time. We had that a few years ago up in the eastern part of the state on a few other issues that occurred. But it's not good for our democracy to have moving from one end of the spectrum to the other. Yet that's what would occur. So based on that, we need to have well-reasoned public policy based on facts, based on what the issues really are before the body. And the governing body needs to evaluate and assess the real issues you may be for or against a particular policy. It is perfectly fine to be against data centers. There's nothing wrong with that. But be against what the actual issue is, not necessarily the data center, but if you're against the noise pollution, if you're against the non-disclosure agreements that are required. I mean, what is it exactly you would be against? Not just the words data center. I mean, we'll walk through some of this. So where are we today? Well, on the hyperscale, that's a nice word for really large data center, large-scale operations. We have 6 in the state, which are upwards of $30 billion in size. And there's no real good way to determine or to describe the size of the data center except basically how much, it's like not really number of units or how much megawatts of power they've been using, but really the value of the operation. But these 6 operations are in excess of 30 billion. There are 5 that are currently in development, not just contemplated, but in development. And there are 4 that were estimated at about 25 billion that were defeated. They were proposed, they were discussed, they were debated, and a governing body either defeated the proposal or the entity itself withdrew after, for any number of reasons, mostly public sentiment. So let's walk through the pros and cons of a data center. And let me just walk through these, and you may have questions, and I'd encourage you to ask all you like. I may not have all the answers to all of your questions. I'm not an expert in data centers, but I've talked with the utility industry. I've talked with the data center folks. I've talked with opponents of data centers, and I've talked with many citizens on the issue. So I have some knowledge of this issue, but it's not my expertise. All right, so some of the pros. Well, here's what some folks would say the pros are. One of the pros is that it's a large capital investment. Wisconsin's major projects range from roughly $1 billion to $15 billion. The billion was the Meta Center in Beaver Dam. The $15 billion was the Vantage operation in Port Washington. So there are 7 projects announced in 2025 that totaled roughly $57 billion. That's a combination of the 6 that are currently in operation and then the 5 that have been that are in development. A second pro is construction employment. The Mount Pleasant operation employed nearly 10,000 construction workers over approximately a 2-year period. In total, the ones currently in operation are expected to employ roughly 4,000 plus construction jobs, mostly union. I guess that's in the Port Washington operation. So a lot of union labor, but not entirely. That is what many people would say is a pro. Another pro that people assess to data centers is that it's the creation of permanent jobs. Though modest relative to investment, Microsoft's contemplated Mount Pleasant building employs about 300 or 550 full-time employees. Meta's Beaver Dam will employ roughly 100. There's a think tank called Brookings, and they say roughly it's 100 permanent jobs per large-scale facility. That is a very rough estimate because large scale has lots of different meanings. You can have very large scale or relatively small large scale, but roughly 100 permanent jobs per large scale facility. Another pro, utility and grid infrastructure is paid for by the developer, not the county or other entities or ratepayers. Meta is funding nearly $200 million in the Alliant Energy substation transmission upgrades for Beaver Dam. The PSC's latest tariff order requires very large customers to cover 100% of dedicated generation and grid costs. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. Another pro, property and utility tax base growth. I say this, I want to repeat that. Property and utility tax base growth, not, there's a negative to the tax issue as well, and that is sales and use tax exemption. We'll get to that in a second. But the property and utility tax base growth, plus negotiated community benefits in some deals, not all deals, but some deals. Meta's 10-year, $15 million contribution to Alliance Low-Income Energy Assistance was one example. DeForest, that's a failed example that did not go through. The DeForest deal included a guaranteed tax revenue, some river improvements, and affordable housing commitments. That did not happen. It was eventually turned down by the DeForest City Council, but that deal would have included those things. Another pro, leverage for for local government. Because these are high-value, high-profile projects, communities that engage early have negotiating power on siting, buffers, water protection, and benefit sharing before any permit is granted. After the permit is granted, your negotiating and leverage is lessened, generally speaking. Not always, but generally. All right, let's go to the cons for a moment. The downside of a data center. What is often mentioned, electricity cost shift, risk to residential and small business ratepayers. This was the central issue in the We Energies rate case, and that is listed as a con, but I'm gonna get to how that was addressed here momentarily. Another downside, state sales and use tax exemption. It reduces state revenue. The projected is roughly $1.5 billion in foregone construction and about $370 million per year in ongoing statewide sales and use tax. Now, this is a little bit debatable because some economists would say if you'd never built the data center, you wouldn't have had the sales and use tax anyway. So did you really lose it? Well, there's no right or wrong to that debate, but roughly $370 million lost because we're not applying the sales and use tax. Another negative, water use and private well contamination risk. Significant driver of the opposition elsewhere in the state has been this issue. Some developers, like Meta, have adopted dry cooling design specifically to minimize this, so the actual risk varies a great deal by project design, and we'll talk a little bit about this in just a few minutes. Another downside negative, noise, dust, and light pollution. Residents near Microsoft's Fall Water, the Mount Pleasant project, filed a class action lawsuit in July of 2026 over noise and dust. Noise is commonly tied to diesel backup generators and cooling equipment and is a legitimate item for siting and buffer conditions. So that was definitely an issue. Another downside, a negative, farmland and open space conversion. The proposed and rejected projects elsewhere in the state have looked at roughly 320 to over 1,600 acres of farmland being used per data center site. Another negative, modest permanent job counts. We talked about roughly 100 permanent jobs per data center. What some people say is a negative to data centers, people would say only modest permanent job counts. Relative to the scale and investment and infrastructure commitment, it's a fair point to weigh, but honestly, it's again, when you look at construction jobs and tax base, I'm not really sure that that's much of a con. Another negative, process and trust risk. All right, this is probably the biggest negative when it comes to cons of a data center. The non-disclosure agreements that have been it's been the single biggest driver of public backlash statewide. Independent of what communities ultimately decided about the projects themselves, the non-disclosure agreements have been a sticking point almost everywhere that they've been in place. And then lastly, a con, no statewide legislative framework has been put in place as of yet. As of mid-2026, the legislature has not passed any data center-specific siting, water, or NDA legislation. I'm not sure we're going to get there, depending upon what happens with the elections, but I would not be looking for any major action, uniform action that's imminent. Okay, so with that brief sort of pro-con, let's talk about the criticisms of data centers, and I want to talk about whether these are well-documented criticisms and whether they're legitimate or not. So, the number one criticism, the non-disclosure agreement. This secrecy issue. This is definitely legitimate as a process complaint. Independent of what you think of data centers themselves, it's a governance criticism. It's not really a criticism of the data center itself. It's a criticism of the governance. This issue is largely self-inflicted by the governing bodies and the data center hierarchy. They have voluntarily entered into these non-disclosures. Rebecca may speak to this issue. I'm not really even sure that the non-disclosure can be enforced for a local unit of government, but nonetheless, that has been a major issue when it comes to criticism of data centers. So that's definitely a legitimate criticism, and it comes up all the time. Another critique, foregone tax revenue via the sales tax exemption. We talked about it earlier. This is, I'm not really sure that this is a legitimate critique. I wouldn't put this in a strong critique category because you could argue this either way. We're foregoing 370, roughly speaking, of the current data centers, roughly sales and use tax revenue as a state and locals, $370 million a year. But we wouldn't have that if there were no data centers. So the fact that we're having data centers and we give the exemption means we're not getting it. Yet, if we have the data centers, we are going to get the property tax base and income tax for those that are employed, income tax for all of the construction workers. So there is some economic benefit there. You can have all kinds of economic models that will tell you there's a net positive to that, but we are foregoing that sales and use tax during the construction. That is definitely true. Is this a legitimate critique? It's technically, factually legitimate, but I wouldn't put a lot of weight in it. Moderately legitimate, let's go through a couple of those. Permanent job counts relative to investment. Okay, so Brookings says roughly 100 jobs per large-scale data center. As we said, Mount Pleasant is employing 550. Beaver Dam is roughly 100. Is it legitimate? Is that a legitimate criticism? I guess technically, I suppose you could say yes. But in comparison to other economic development ventures, I'm not sure it really holds a lot of water. So if we're going to criticize the existence of a data center based on permanent jobs, would we not also have to criticize, I guess, baseball diamonds and soccer fields, taking up a lot of land but not a lot of employees, or storage units, or any number of other employers or operations that have large land use but not a lot of employees? So that is one where it sort of falls in the category of, I don't like data centers, so I'm going to dream up any way I can to criticize it. So I'm not sure that's much of a legitimate issue. Another critique, water use. This is absolutely a legitimate issue. for the evaporative cooling designs, but increasingly it is greatly overstated as a blanket criticism because several of the Wisconsin projects, for example, Meta's Beaver Dam, Microsoft's stated design goals, they're using dry cooling or closed loop systems. So this is one where, depending upon the design, it could absolutely be a legitimate criticism of a data center. But if you're using a dry cooling or a closed loop, not so much of a legitimate criticism. We would need to know what type of a system is being proposed for the cooling of the operations within the data center. So that could be a legitimate criticism, or it could simply be a straw man type criticism. Noise and light pollution. This is a legitimate criticism, but it's absolutely manageable. So this has been a criticism in other operations. However, for example, in one of the operations, I think it was the Mount Pleasant one, when this was raised, they engaged in barriers or setbacks, and so you could mitigate the noise and light pollution issue during construction and or thereafter. So this is definitely a legitimate criticism, but it's also one that by design or modified design can be addressed. So it's legitimate, documented, but it's also flexible. Okay, another criticism, cost shift to taxpayers. Okay, we'll spend just a few minutes on this, because this was one of the biggest criticisms of the data centers. Data centers are going to come into my community. They're going to use a lot of power. They're going to build power plants, transmission lines. They're going to use a lot of power, and I, as a small business or a resident, am going to be stuck with a higher bill. Well, in March of the answer to that is that's not correct. In March of 2025, We Energies asked state regulators, the Public Service Commission, for permission to create a special electric rate. It was called Very Large Customer Tariff. In other words, Very Large Customer Rate, for large power users like data centers. The utility's original plan would have had data centers pay for 75% of the cost of a new power plant built to serve the data centers, and regular customers, households, and small businesses would cover the other 25% plus the ongoing fuel costs. That was the proposal that was submitted to the PSC. That was in March of 25. In April of 26, about a year later, the Public Service Commission announced the decision. They said, in plain English, they said, if a data center wants power, the data center is going to pay for it. In other words, here are the points. Data centers, the 75-25, they threw it out. Data centers have to pay for 100% of the cost of the power and infrastructure built for the data center. It locked the data centers into a 15-year contract, so a data center could not come in, get power for a few years, and then leave. They were committed for 15 years of that 100%, paying for 100% of that cost. It lowered the size of the threshold for which companies had this rule applied to. It was 500 megawatt. It went down to 100 megawatt. So any entity using 100 megawatt or higher, this rule applied to it. So 100 megawatts or more, you have to pay for 100% of the infrastructure and the power that you're going to use to run your operation. And it required the utility to report back to the Public Service Commission on a regular basis. So one of the biggest criticisms of the data centers, they're going to come in, use a lot of power, and others are going to have to pay for it. The Public Service Commission told We Energies no. Now that applies to We Energies. I suspect that there's an appeal of that. We'll see where that appeal goes. I would be surprised if it went anywhere, but we'll see. I would suspect that there will be similar decisions made in regard to other ventures in the data center world. Another critique? Oh, we're almost done, and then we can, we're almost done. Farmland, open space loss. This is definitely a real, this is definitely real. It's real in terms of acreage. As I said earlier, 300 to 1,600 is roughly what's been utilized in the data centers. Definitely a legitimate issue. But the use of 300 to 1,600 acres for a data center, it's comparable or less to many other operations that we use for other types of ventures. Might be a housing development or any number of other things. So definitely a criticism, definitely real, but in comparison to others, a body would have to evaluate that. And then getting toward the end here, data centers are increasingly bad for the local economies. That is a criticism we've heard quite a bit. The polling that you sometimes hear cited shows public skepticism, but there's a sentiment, that's a sentiment finding, not an economic one. It doesn't establish the underlying, that the underlying deals are bad, only that they're unpopular. Now those are two different things. It might be, it doesn't mean, it might be unpopular, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It could be bad, could be unpopular and bad, but it could be good and unpopular. So you have to evaluate that. Unpopularity and illegitimacy are not the same thing. They're different. That's part of what our responsibility is as local government officials, city, town, village, county. We're not necessarily here to make the popular choice, but a well-reasoned choice. And having a data center may not be a good choice in Barron County or Northwest Wisconsin or anywhere. It may not be a good choice, but then again, it may. You have to decide that. And there are many considerations that you have to put into the mixing bowl before you make a decision. Let's see. I guess I'll end there, and then we can open it up to questions, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. Yes, yeah.
So as I said, I split you up in red, white, and blue. So red team, you're on. First question, Supervisor Cook.
Make sure
Please use your mic. Please use your mic, everyone.
Very nice job. I am on an electrical co-op board in Barron County and the communities we serve. When the sand plants came in, they had to pay for all of their infrastructure, 100% upfront. So when they left, their substations, well, actually our substations, they paid for those. So I think of the 24 co-ops, at least that Dairyland has, that would probably be something that you would see. The other thing that you can put into a concern, which is real, is that data centers don't help our reliability issue in that when it comes to renewables, data centers run 24/7. Unlike Bitcoin and some other types of data issues, these plants are required to run 24/7. They do not shut down. So from a reliability standpoint, our base load, which is our coal, nuclear, gas generation, that's what we have. So all the solar fields, wind farms that we put up do not help alleviate that issue, which is a real issue moving forward. But no, I thought it was a good presentation. The one thing I would like in terms of scale of the 6 that we do have in the state, I know you talked about putting it in billions. Of those 6, what is their footprint in acres? Do we know that?
Let me see here. I don't have the acreage for the footprint. I have some of the square footage for the facility, but I can, let me see if I can find that and I'll get
Yeah.
it to the body.
Because, again, and
Yeah.
to put it in perspective, when we take a look at some of the renewables, I mean, everyone talks about how much farmland or in terms of open spaces, actually knowing that, just in terms of perspective.
Yeah, good, very good point.
Thank you.
I'll see if I can find that. On the 6 that are current, I know I can find it. On the ones that are being contemplated, they're guarded with the information, but on the 6 I can find for sure.
Thank you.
Excellent. Red team, other questions? Supervisor Anderson.
Yes, this might be rather naive on my part, but why do we need a data center?
Artificial intelligence uses enormous computing power, and it runs through data centers. And now, if you're using Google, you'd have to purposely not use artificial intelligence to use Google, which is using a data center. So when you do a Google search, it's running through a data center. And these data centers are going to be built somewhere: Russia, China, India, or the United States. The United States government has taken the position that if they're going to be built somewhere, they would rather have them built within the borders of the United States or North America rather than overseas. So if we did not have data centers, well, I guess there's not much reason to talk about that because they're going to happen, Patty. And it's pure computing power. The society's moving very rapidly, whether it's online medical health, which is moving incredibly rapidly, whether it's just young people today making their TikToks. I mean, it's everything. But artificial intelligence is driving a lot of it.
And so the purpose is, for what reason do we save this data?
Do we save it?
Why is it there?
Oh, there's saving the data. It's not really saving the data. It's the computing power of searching and communicating with all other, with I guess, the metaverse of where all the data is. So this isn't an area where a lot of data is stored so that you do a search and it goes and looks for, it's not like it's a giant encyclopedia where you go to search for it. That's not what that is. It's not like a cloud storage. This is massive, rapid searching of millions of high-powered chips talking to each other.
Okay, so we just used AI to answer Supervisor Cook's question. Here they are. The Vantage Data Center in Port Washington, 2.5 million square feet across 4 single-story buildings. So let's go back. You know, everybody on this, you know that the county policy is we use the UW extension model of AI. We also cite our sources. So this came from the Wisconsin property map. So I asked this question: what is the total square footage of the hyper data centers located in Wisconsin? The Wisconsin property map answered my question this way. The Vantage Data Centers, Port Washington, 2.5 million square feet across 4 single-story buildings. Need to slide down, just give me just a second.
I think you wanted acreage, Jeff.
Oh, you wanted acreage. Can you convert square feet to acreage, Randy? I thought you could. You were
By 43,560.
Yep.
And they're all single floors.
Yep.
I can get
okay.
that.
Okay. So Microsoft Fairwater campus,
But
Mount Pleasant.
you have
I
AI
can-
right there.
Right, exactly. That's 1.2 million square feet across 3 massive buildings. Microsoft Campus Kenosha, 1 million square feet across 4 250,000 square foot buildings. And finally, the Meta Campus at Beaver Dam, 700,000 square feet. It's 2.7, 3.7. You have 4.2 million square feet, Randy.
I'll tell you how many acres.
Okay. That's, okay, so red team, you're still back. So that would end with Supervisor Gores would be our last member of the red team. Is there another question from this group before Supervisor Efforts?
Well, the first question would be, that was just the building space, not the campus.
Right.
Okay, so that's, all right.
It would be
And,
larger than that, yeah.
going with the electricity and the power generation, I'm just wondering about, and maybe Supervisor Cook can answer this when he's done doing his math with the acreage.
Well, actually, I'm just going to ask Chat how many acres he can do the math. Go ahead.
So, I mean, you hear different things. It's going to be terrible on the energy. It's going to, they'll pay for it. But the average load, you know, if we get several of these in the area or one of these in the area, Dairyland Power, do they have the capacity for that? I mean, there's, you know, to add to that, the reason I'm asking is the last 2 years, there's been issues with Dairyland Power being down, and then, or part of their generation being down for 2 separate reasons. And then we had to absorb in our bills buying it from other areas and bringing the power in. And in the middle of winter, if you do that, it's way more expensive. So how I don't know if I'm explaining it okay, but how much closer is that margin where if we get a really cold blizzard for a couple of weeks, or we get 100 degrees for a couple of weeks, how much closer does it put us to having to do that and try to find power elsewhere and at a higher cost?
I would definitely put that into the very legitimate question category, and you phrased it very well. So the issue, and in our state, we have separated power generation from grid delivery. So in our state, well, we have a couple different, mostly it's American Transmission Company with the grid system, and then generators of power separately. Now it's not entirely that way, but it's mostly that way. So what the PSC did in their order is essentially say that the data center is responsible for the build out of the infrastructure and cost to utilize and have the power delivered to the data center. Now, that's in our plain English. It's kind of mushy language. So you would have a conversation. If you were serious about having a data center in your area, you'd certainly want to have that conversation about what does that mean? What does the Public Service Commission order mean? And how assured can we be in our community, whatever community is being contemplated, that we are not going to be in a position where we have to get power and have a potential grid issue. So that might be an ATC question. It might be a local electric co-op question. I'm not sure what grid system they might be using, but we'd want to ask that question, most assuredly. Yeah.
If I can, you touched on it. The problem, so all these data centers, my understanding is they have to have their own backup generation. Because if things happen and we go into where everyone has to buy peak rates, so her husband, full disclosure, is on Barron Electric Board with me. We did have an incident where we had a coal generation plant go down. It was down for 2.5 weeks, and we had to buy off the open market, which we do anyway. All electricity that's generated, even if you have a solar panel that generates more than you can use, gets put on the grid, and the co-ops, Dairyland Power, has to buy that back and sell it to the co-ops. Part of the cons is when these peak loads happen, which you guys right now are getting 11 cents, 13 cents a kilowatt charge. Well, when those peak loads happen, that 11 cents can turn into $111 like that. So data centers have their own, most data centers, I think all, have backup generation. That's the noise issue. Because those are typically either big diesel engines or they're jet turbine engines. And they make noise.
Okay, red team, anyone else? That ends at Supervisor.
I have
Supervisor Gores, go ahead, please.
More of a comment than anything. I guess I'm a farmer at heart, so I'm big time concerned here with the amount of cropland and stuff like that. It's being eaten up by these solar panels and by these data centers and stuff like that there. And like I said, what I call them, when they sat there and they came out with these solar panels, they said, well, it's only going to be 1.6% of the cropland in Barron County. Well, if you sit there and you go 1.6% on one project and 1.6% on another and 2 point, all of a sudden we've lost 10% of our cropland. And I also like to know if we would sit there and could evaluate the land there and maybe go use, put some of these centers or whatever in marginal land or land that is essentially wasteland. Because, I mean, they sit there and they want to go and put it, like, for instance, to what they were talking in Menominee, they were sitting there talking while I was looking at, watching TV there, it was beautiful flat cropland. Well, I know that what they call them, they don't want to sit there and use all the doggone so much money on excavating. Well, of course, so they're going to come in with the flattest piece of property that they can find and put it on just so that they can go out there and just start building instead of doing the excavating and stuff like that. That's just very disheartening for me.
Well, I think this might fall under the leverage for a local community. I mean, that specific comment on the use of farmland, while I think you make a very good point, 1.6, 1.6, 1.6, pretty soon 10% of our land is gone or not available for farmland. So it adds up quick. It may sound small at first, but it adds up quick. But the fact that there is a public backlash, whether it's based on fact or based on feeling, there is a public backlash. So it's difficult in many cases to site a data center. So if a community was interested in a data center and was going to engage in conversations, and if I were the data center and you said to me, I'm willing to have a conversation with you, but I'd like you to look at marginal land as opposed to farmland. If I have that conversation with one community and I have 5 other communities saying, I don't like you, I'm going to go to the community that says, let's have a conversation about marginal land. I'd be very open to that, given the current, I guess, landscape that we're involved in. So I think you have an opportunity if that's what you'd like to do. You may also say, I don't even want it on marginal land. That's up to the community itself. But you make a very good point, and in a testy environment, I think you hold some cards to say we'd rather have it on marginal land than farmland.
I just
All right. I'm going to go on now to the white team. That'd be Supervisor Heller, Jenkins, Krug, Kuslik, Langman, McCready, Miller, Moan, and Nelson. Do you have any questions? Supervisor Heller.
When we're looking at this, we're talking about using the data centers for general search and for looking for things, but are the data centers not also integral to data security and making sure that our data is going to be held within the bounds of the United States and not being shipped out overseas where we don't have control over our own data?
It's an excellent point. I mean, the answer I gave Patty was the pop culture answer, but there is so much more to data centers. And that's why our federal government has made it relatively clear that not only that data centers are going to exist, but since they are going to exist, the choice of their existence being in a foreign land that may not be friendly to the United States or may not be friendly to the United States in the future is not desirable, but rather having them within the borders of the United States, or at least within the borders of an ally of the United States, is much, much preferable. It due in part to a whole host of things, but national security being one of them, data security being another, any number of national interests. You make an excellent point, sir.
Other questions from the white team?
was wondering, what is the closest proximity that family homes could be built within or around that data center? So they have an environment that is safe and quiet enough?
That's a very good question. And it's a very good question. It really depends on the design. Some people have indicated they could hear the data center from quite some distance away. I have been at data center sites that have been operational. I had to get within 20 feet to hear anything. So that was a design issue. So it will definitely depend on the design. And then again on the water, when you say safe, if you're on let's say a well, it would depend on what kind of water usage they are using. Is it a closed loop system or a dry cooling system? No issues at all. If it is on a municipal system, again, no issues at all. Or very likely no issues at all. I guess you can say, you shouldn't say never no issues, but highly likely no issues. So it would all depend on the design. Now, most of these data centers are, we don't have a lot to choose from, but around the country, when you look at where data centers have been located, they are not necessarily in residential areas. They are in industrial park areas or out by themselves, unfortunately, sometimes on very nice farmland, but they're not planted in the middle of residential areas. Now, sometimes they're relatively close to some residences. For example, in Loudoun County, Virginia, perhaps the data center capital of the world, they have in their one single county, I think the number was, I think it's 252 data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia. They've gone 100% in on data centers. I haven't been there, but I'm guessing there's probably some residences close to a data center there. But how close can you get? Depends on the design.
They aren't making land anymore.
They're not making any more land, that's true.
And our residences keep spreading out, and that's why I'm a little concerned
That's
whether.
no more land
And
is
it
being
makes a
made, that's
difference
true.
on the weather conditions too.
Yes, it would depend on weather and wind and what kind of barriers might be put up. That's true. And that, again, that would be something, if it were me and I was in a serious conversation, I would be wanting to talk about design and sound or site barriers, if that's what you're interested in. I'd want to talk about that. And in the current landscape, you have some leverage.
In these cases, you said whether you could hardly hear the sound. What are the best ways to effectively cut the noise out?
An actual physical barrier, and then use of materials, the right kind of material. Maybe it's an earthen berm. It might be the materials today. There are some fascinating materials that builders are using even in homes to absorb sound. So I'm not a construction expert, but there's some pretty advanced materials to absorb sound. Just depends how high you want to go to where the sound is coming from. If it's muffling a diesel sound or a jet engine sound or just the hum of the internal components, whether the cement walls are 6 inches thick or 12 inches thick, lots of design issues that again, if you were in conversations with a potential developer, those are the kinds of things you'd want to talk about. You want to talk about your concerns, and then you'd want them to come back with ideas on how they would address your concerns.
Continuing on with the white team, any questions? Dennis, Supervisor Jenkins?
I'm just, I'm curious, is there like a large swing going from the water-cooled systems to the dry and more enclosed systems in the industry?
Large swing, well, the trend is definitely away from evaporative systems and definitely toward closed loop and dry cooling. That is definitely the trend. I don't know the reason why, but I'm guessing public sentiment has something to do with it. So that's definitely the trend.
Okay.
Supervisor Langman?
Hey, thank you very much for coming here. A lot of good information. I got a couple of comments. I'm involved also with a co-op, but it happens to be of the broadband variety. What type of information do you have about any data centers that are located in Eau Claire?
Do you know the name of the one you're thinking of?
Yes, I do. Our co-op happens to be part owner of that data center.
Is it one that's currently in existence or being developed?
It's in existence. It's named WIN Technologies. And what it is, it's a consortium of about 30 plus co-ops ranging from central Illinois, most of the entire state of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and the UP. And most of the people that are sitting in this room are sending technology to this data center. And it's located in the old Uniroyal building. Have anybody ever heard? Banbury Place. I toured it last year. It's got about 100 people that work there. They're voted 3 years in a row of one of Eau Claire's best places to work. Now, you know, obviously, this whole when you talk about data centers, it's the big bad wolf is what seems to be the public sentiment. And I do understand the fact that we all use power, but nobody wants a power plant next to our house. But there are solutions to smaller, and I understand in the definition. There's quite a few pages of a definition of what that data center, how large scale it could possibly be, and this doesn't look like this fits in that. But you know, I'm glad that Louis is going to allow us to get some more education, because there's a lot of stuff that the general public doesn't understand about what this works, the pros and the con. And thanks for giving the opportunity for people to learn more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have Eau Claire on my list, and maybe it's because it didn't. It's because of the size. But the last point you made is really an excellent point, and I'll maybe make more clearly a point I made earlier. It's fine to be opposed really to anything at all, or in support of anything at all, but I would urge the governing body, not just this Barron County Board, but really any governing body, and I know many of you are on other governing bodies as well. But I'll use data centers as an actual example. As opposed to being for or against data centers, I would urge you to consider being for or against something below that, the subset thereof. I mean, are we against data centers, or are we against the light pollution, or the sound, or the dust? I mean, is that our problem? Because if that's our problem, okay, well, let's address that. See if we can be addressed. Maybe it can't be addressed. Well, in that case, I just can't see my way clear, because we cannot address that. But you can't. We don't want to just be absolutely against it, or we don't want to be 100% for it. Well, okay, but what happens? They're all going to be used for evil purposes, so it doesn't matter. I'm for it. It doesn't make any sense. It'd be like saying I'm against all bridges because you know I don't like the beams that they use. Well, that's ridiculous. Change the beams. You can still be for bridges. We have to be. If we have a problem, let's address it. If we're for something, just make sure we know what we're for. So we don't want to use blanket statements without knowing exactly what it is we are for or against. And then if we're against it, let's try to address it. If it can't be addressed, you're perfectly legitimate to be against something. If you're for something and it is you understand why you're for it, perfectly fine to be for it.
We're doing great, folks. White team, you want more questions, or do you want me to defer to the blue team? I see nothing, so blue team members, questions to Mr. O'Connell. Supervisor Wentz.
Actually, I have several, but I'll try to limit the questions I have. The first one is not knowing much about the bigger data centers that you mentioned in DeForest and so forth. When those developments were in the planning stages, were there any requirements either at the county or city or state level for environmental impact reviews, for example?
Yes, yeah. In several of those cases, they had environmental impact studies, issues. Yes, they now not to the extent where we might have had a what is called an EIS, environmental impact statement, like a DNR type statement. But certainly there would be an impact, environmental impact, water issue, contamination issue, and around the site. Yes, there'd be those kinds of issues that would be required of any particular building permit or the zoning department. Absolutely.
And who would conduct those reviews then?
Well, generally it's going to be a private. They might hire out a private entity to conduct that. I'm not sure in the cases of the data centers. I'm not sure how that would go, but maybe a mutually agreed upon private entity. I don't know that for certain, but that would make some sense to me.
Okay, Supervisor Wentz, I can't let that's the end of the question. I got to respect. We have to let your other team members ask
That's
questions,
fine.
or I have to give it back to the red team. So Supervisor Greg Turcotte.
Thank you for coming and sharing the information. My question is more if a data center is built with property taxes, and does this affect net new construction to help the county down the road with levy limits?
Well, a data center is a significant build. The dollar amount, the value dollar amount on these data centers has been pretty significant, at least on the large scale ones. So that's going to be a pretty significant net new construction. But Barron County is a pretty big county. So, is it going to be noticeable? It'd be noticeable, but is it going to bring your property taxes down to zero? No, but you'd probably notice it. I mean, Jeff probably even ran the numbers. I don't know.
I mean, it would. If we got a $40 million, that would be, or $7 billion. So if it was 40 million, take that. That'd be what, 5% drop in equalized valuation. So that'd be a 5% drop in your mill rate. But may I chime in, Mark?
Yep.
We do have a town chair sitting here, but to my left, and we're finding out that to get around their property taxes, they don't attach them to the soil. So now they're personal property, and the state legislature did away with personal property taxes. So that's how they get around paying taxes. So there's no upside effect for the county from the property tax side. So, Dunn County. Supervisor Schradel.
Yeah, I think we've had data centers and small, like Fran was talking about, for a long time. And of course, we're in constant competition with China, which we have to acknowledge and hopefully beat them at it, because they don't come to a board like this and say, well, we want to put up a data center. They just do it because the government orders it. So another thing, going back to probably the 1850s during the Industrial Revolution, people were just wild. We're going to lose our jobs. Our kids won't have any jobs. Then you got to the 1900s. What are we going to do with all the horses? Now the cars are coming in. The harness maker in the corner, he's going to be out of business. So I think this is inevitable, but I agree we should really look into this. I thank you for your input, Mr. O'Connell. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Blue team members, you have Supervisor Vaughn.
Can we go back to the We Energies and the PSC ruling?
Yeah.
You said that was just for We Energies, so if our township doesn't have We Energies, it would not affect us at all?
It would not affect you. There would have to be another request for a tariff adjustment, but I would be incredibly surprised if this does not get extended to all operations. That would be something that I could see the legislature and governor agreeing on, regardless of who occupies the legislature and governor's office. Depending upon how the elections go, they may not agree on much of anything, but this might be one of those things they could agree on. I could see that.
Other questions? No, I have to go to Supervisor Wenzel.
And I'm happy to talk with anyone after this meeting. You can call me anytime, day, night, weekend, or holiday. Chat with you as much as you like.
Hi, Mark. Thanks a lot. I came in, sorry.
No, it's.
Am I good? Okay. Thanks a lot for the stuff you shared. My opinions are based on what I've heard from people that are complaining. So thank you for that. What you mentioned, county leverage, or leverage that we could have doing this early. At what point, how do we protect that leverage and still using a moratorium? And what, I forgot this, the NDAs. I've heard a lot of conflicting messages about the NDAs too. They're worthless. They're helpful. What are your thoughts on that? And how have other areas that have had luck with those?
Well, the NDAs, perhaps Rebecca can speak to this when she speaks in a few minutes, but the NDAs have been a flashpoint for the citizenry for some time, because they're viewed as secretive, and somehow the information that should be revealed is not being revealed. Now, there is, in the private sector, there is, of course, reason for NDAs, because deals, if they were public, could go awry. If you were trying to acquire land, if you were trying to get leaseholds, if you're trying to put a deal together, but if the information got out, it could blow the whole thing up, things of that sort. And so there are reasons for an NDA. The question is whether a public entity, if it holds any water, and that's something perhaps that Rebecca can get into. On the first part, the leverage question, let's take a different state. If you were and to the gentleman's earlier point, we've had data centers around for a long time. This is not a new issue. It's the issue of the day, but it's not new. I mean, our friends to the southwest, Iowa, have had data centers for decades. It's just become the flavor of the day and the issue. But if we had a state where local communities around our entire state were saying, I want a data center, bring a data center in here, and they were competing, then our leverage becomes basically non-existent. But we don't have that. We have, there's difficulty in citing a data center. So that's where the leverage takes hold. That's where it exists. Now, we also have communities all over the state passing moratoriums. Now, a moratorium to take a break and think about things, okay, fine. A moratorium which is window dressing for a ban, not as good, not so much. And that potentially invites litigation as well, potentially. So you got to be careful about that. I mean, to say, we're going to have it's moratorium, but really we're just doing that because we want to ban them forever. It's probably not a wise policy move. Where does your leverage end? When data centers have choices as to where they are going to go, and communities have said, we would like to work with you, and we're inviting you into our community, and we can come to agreement on using marginal land and sound barriers and we'll work with you on this, or work with you on that, and the data center says, we'll do this and this and this for you. When that starts happening, leverage decreases. When will that be? I'm not sure. It's going to happen at some point. At some point, communities in our state are going to say, I think I want a data center. Some will. Many will not. Some will. When that happens, leverage decreases.
Supervisor Schneider, you have the floor.
I guess the question I had is there any security issues that fall back onto the county from, security to fire protection or all those kinds of things?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the issues that we're concerned about. There's a fire and EMS is a major issue with these data centers. I mean, that is an issue. And if it is in a township, our townships are not well equipped. Some townships are not well equipped to handle fire, not so much EMS because we don't have a lot of employees, but a fire issue at a large scale facility. That is definitely an issue, And that should be one of the issues on the table. If you were going to pursue a conversation with a data center, you would want to talk about that. You'd want to have agreements in place with a local municipality, nearby municipality, perhaps the county, although we're not involved in fire, but local municipalities, you want to be able to address that, because we do not want a large scale facility going up in flames, and no one wants that. So you'd want to address that. Now, security issue, these are generally very large buildings with thick cement walls. You're not gonna climb in through the window of one of these things. So that not quite as much there.
And they're likely not.
Supervisor Oki.
Does anybody else on the blue team want to talk that hasn't? The other one, okay. Would
have more questions.
would the sand plants areas be a good place for a data center?
Again, I'm not a construction person. Depends on how deep you could put footings, I suppose, but I don't see why not. I mean, they've got transportation access, and I mean, as a layman, it would seem to me that'd be a pretty good spot. It's generally flat land,
and also you need the infrastructure like the interstates having, that's why DeForest and Dunn County and St. Croix County are getting some of the hyper ones, because they have the underground wiring and infrastructure there, which I don't think we have in Barron. So we aren't going to get the biggest of the biggest. We'd probably get something in the mid-range if we wanted some.
Yeah, access to power and the grid would be incredibly important. And then how far, if you know direct access, how far it has to be built out, which is a cost factor to the data center, would be an issue that the data center or the developer would have to consider. Of course, with a sand plant, I'm not sure what power needs that they had previously, but I'm guessing they were notable. So there may be significant power already piped into a sand area. But yeah, power would be a major issue. And then whether it's an evaporative system with a sand plant, or whether it's a dry cooling or a closed loop, that would be another issue. Those are probably some of the major issues that would be under consideration for a developer.
Because we have had, well, just so everybody knows, the NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. But we have had the JDAs with the solar farms and stuff, and so we've got some experience with doing that. And that's why I want everybody to get as knowledgeable as they can today, in between the 29th, whatever, because like they said, the leverage is going to go down. And if we want a data center. Now, if we did, now's the time to be looking at it, because we do have some leverage, and we do have, I think, a chance here. Now, I'm not saying, and don't put in the paper, Louis Oki says, let's get data centers here. But, anyway.
Well, the chairman makes a very good point, referencing a JDA, Joint Development Agreement. So if you were going to go forward, whether it's a data center or some other venture that required public sector infrastructure or public sector interests, you would want to consider a joint development agreement. In other words, an agreement where some of your needs and concerns would be addressed. And that is where a tollless law comes in. I mean, they have lots of experience in this area, and that is where you'd want to address some of the fire EMS issues, maybe some of the transportation issues, maybe the what's going to happen to the building down the road issues, things of that sort. I mean, for example, one of the issues that it's talked about in some other counties, what happens if when the owner of the data center or user of the data center, in some cases the user may not be the owner, it might be a developer, but what happens when the user of the data center is no longer needs it? 25 years from now, there is some other technology and we no longer use data centers. We use lasers and the satellites. Okay, what happens then? We just have a great big empty building. Well, we have that now sometimes with a Walmart, or we had it with Kmart stores for a while, but okay, this is not something new, but we have that big, large building. So we want to think about that in advance. Well, we might say in a joint development agreement, when you're building this data center, why don't you build some cutouts for large equipment, just in case 20 years from now you vacate, maybe we'll buy the building for $1 and house all of our large county trucks in that building with the sand or the salt. Okay, they might say, forget it. No, they might say, okay, that's easy to do in the outset. It'd be hard to do after the fact, but it's easy to do when we think about it in advance. Okay, they might say, oh, that's an easy one. Sure, what else do you need? Maybe that's the part of the conversation. That all happens in a joint development agreement. So if you talk early, that's part of that leverage issue. If you were in a conversation to try to address some of your concerns or needs or desires that you anticipate down the road.
All right, so blue team, you're done. Back, no, we have to go back. We're gonna do this, gonna go back to the red team. So questions, any more questions from the red team? Supervisor, we're gonna go down the row. Cook, Efforts, Ellison.
Just quickly, I did, so Microsoft, their campus, that's what they call it. They cover up about 600 acres. Building, the footprint of the building now, of all of them, is only 88 acres. Total, those 6 are gonna buy up about 4,800 acres. Much like your airports, if they're starting to do it, the Rice Lake Airport, if you go out there, there's cropland inside that fence. And that's part of their buffering capacity. So you're not losing all of that land to the data center itself. I mean, that's just part of their buffering process and ensuring that you can't hear them, so.
Thank you, Supervisor Cook. Supervisor Efforts, you have the floor.
Yeah, my question is to the Dunn County representative. I don't know if I'm the only one, but you said that, or it was stated that the property tax doesn't apply because it's not attached to the land. I don't understand that.
So the one I looked up and the one that's being proposed in my township, Dunn County, is a modular data center. Prefab buildings kind of look a lot like, yeah, it looks a lot like a shipping container. And it's on leased land, so, then the rules are different for assessing. But there's one in Dunn County that I looked up and they're not paying any taxes, so I don't know why. I haven't asked an assessor.
And is that supposed to be a data center or like a Bitcoin thing?
The one being pitched in our township is very small, and I think it's AI.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Ellison, you have the floor.
Yes, given the recent activity for building data centers, they must be quite profitable. Do you know how profitable they are?
Very profitable.
Okay.
Yeah. So it goes to the leverage and joint development agreement. Money is not the issue. So yes, I don't want to make unreasonable asks, but it's on the other, from the data centers, money is not the issue.
Supervisor Anderson, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So Is it true only the mega data centers need the dedicated long-haul data lines, which we talked about? That's correct?
Say that again?
Okay, so dedicated long-haul data lines is what the big mega ones need. Is that correct?
Dedicated long-haul data lines. Well, all of the data centers mean dedicated.
Like they're big like this.
The power lines?
She's talking about internet.
They will all need
Right.
dedicated, let's call them, large internet pipes, let's call it.
yeah.
They will all need that, large or small.
Okay, so even the smaller ones
Yeah.
don't need that. Is that correct? And so we're not close enough to those big ones that would come to Barron County? And there's been no interest in even asking for a data center in Barron County so far. I think that's what I remember hearing.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know. But I would say, given what I know of the landscape, pretty much anywhere in Wisconsin, if a local community said, I'm interested in a potential data center, you will have people knocking on your door, if that's what you said.
Okay.
Now, can infrastructure be built out to create a large enough pipe? Sure. I mean, at a cost, but that would have to be evaluated to determine. But mostly the conversations that are occurring are communities saying, we don't want a data center. So that's currently the conversation. So we never get to the, people don't get to the point of the conversation of, well, how much would it cost to build out for the infrastructure, power and or let's call it the internet pipe. That's not really the right term, but for our conversation, never get to that point.
Anyone else on the red team? White team. Supervisor Kuslik, you have the floor.
So if we look at the footprint from what most of these are looking at, they're 300 to 1,600 acres. If there was an interest of putting one in Barron County, I'm guessing it would be someplace that's in a township near one of our communities. Could you explain how the process and the negotiation would happen between the community, the municipality, the county, the landowner who owns the property and has the rights to it, and the developer, and who takes charge on that? How do all those issues and negotiations take place?
Well, there is no single way that this goes. If you described a way, it's happened in this country. But how it might go, I think you're right that if there was going to be a data center in Barron County, it is likely to be within the jurisdiction of a municipality or an extraterritorial zoning of a municipality or in a township adjacent to a municipality. That is the most likely scenario. There'd be the assessment by a developer would be whether there is a political climate to be for that to happen. That might happen with the municipality, with the township, and or the county. More likely with the Economic Development Corp of one of those three jurisdictions or all of them, communicating with the industry. And if that is the case, then conversations would begin. And those conversations would entail where are potential locations. Your local economic development experts would likely know of potential locations or at least find out where they are. There'd be some site visits. There'd be some conversations about potential lease or acquisition of property. And then there'd be some conversations about, well, how could this possibly come together? Where is the power? What's the power situation? What kind of a system might we have if water is needed? Does the municipal water system, can it handle whatever they wish to put in place? Is the grid system sufficient? All of those types of conversations would be ongoing. If all the answers to all the questions were yes and or maybe, then it would be negotiations might start with one or all of the local jurisdictions about what would be necessary to get the proper approvals, permits, zoning, whatever it might be necessary to have this begin. And then I'm going through the high-level steps. There's 100 steps in between all of these. There probably have to be some sort of public relations campaign to let people know let the citizens know what this would mean, to allay any fears that they might have, to address any concerns that the citizens might have, to talk with local businesses about what it might mean for them, the city, town, village, and or county. Would want to talk with the developer and or perhaps the final operator of the center about what desires they might have in a joint development agreement, all headed up by likely the economic development coordinator or director. All of those things would be happening somewhat one by one, but maybe some of them at the same time. And eventually, you might have a beginning of a project and being built, and then it would happen. But that's one way it might occur. It might. How would it not occur? A developer coming in, never talking to the local jurisdictions, going out and acquiring property or a leasehold on a property, and then saying to the locals, here's what we're going to do. It's highly unlikely that would ever happen. That's a recipe for disaster. So that's not how it would happen. So I would say talking to economic development, your economic development people is most likely how it would happen. Start, at least.
Other questions? Supervisor Lehman.
Just one more comment, Mr. Ellefson's comment about the amount of money that these people possess. It's a unique business platform where the internet broadband companies lay the footwork, the fiber to the home, and transmit all of this data basically for a set fee for us to maintain that line. But the big companies, Netflix pays nothing. They're broadcasting this through our system, and we do not charge them or have no way of charging them. And then what happens is that they start streaming, people start streaming more than what the capacity is. So we're upping our speeds, and it's kind of a burden on the broadband companies. And these people are untaxed and are just raping people at money that you can't even imagine. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, so now we're back to the blue team. Supervisor Wentz.
I still have many more, but I'll choose one. You've talked about property taxes and whether or not they're paid by the companies. Are there data about the effects of data center development on property values for homeowners and businesses in the vicinity of the data center?
I do not have that with me, but I can look into that. Again, they are likely to be, they're not going to be in residential areas, so they're going to be in an industrial type area or out by themselves somewhere. But let me look into that and see if we can find any data, no pun intended, data on what if there's been any impact on data centers. If it's not in Wisconsin, let me see if I can find something around the rest of the country. By the way, that reminds me, the packet of information put together in your packet was really exceptional. I mean, I read everything. It was really, really well done. You get some NACO material here, stuff from your economic development expert. Really good stuff. Really well done.
Supervisor Schradel.
Yeah, just a quick comment on taxes. I watched PBS here 3 weeks ago about the Port Washington, and there was quite a significant savings on property tax for the people in that area. So I don't know how much or anything, but
We had a question I'd like to answer that I used AI again. According to this, let me read the entire text here. Loudoun County, Virginia, widely known as the Data Center Alley, is home to approximately 150 to 200 operational data centers with dozens more in planning or construction stages. Point number one, footprint. Over 53 million square feet of data center spaces operating or under development. Point number two, internet traffic. Roughly 30% to 70% of all global internet traffic passes through facilities in Loudoun County every day. Power capacity. Installed capacity stands at around 4 gigawatts, GW, it says in parentheses, with another 2 to 3 gigawatts in the development pipeline. If you watched the video that I sent to you from Wharton School of Business, they did say that 100%, I think it's 90% of all data centers in the United States of America are located in 6 counties. So going back to the blue team, if there aren't any questions, I'll go over to red. Supervisor Vaughn, you have the floor.
Thank you. Back to your recipe for disaster about coming in without telling anybody. Do you think that would hold true for unzoned towns? Because there's really no regulation there to stop.
Yeah, you never want to say never, but I think it'd be a huge mistake especially in today's environment, to not talk with the local officials. So I would be very surprised if that were to occur. It certainly could. You might get a rogue developer that is trying to force their way, but given the environment today, it's the quickest way to get to create public opposition. So it'd be foolish. It could be done, but it'd be foolish.
Supervisor Oki.
Just for information, Dave Armstrong had prior commitment today. He could not be here, otherwise he would have. He's already compiled a lot of information. He wanted me to say he's not pro, he's not con. He's trying to provide information and help us out, and in the future he definitely will be. So he's gathered a lot of information, and he's pretty up to speed on what's going on.
Well, Dave is one of the smartest guys in Madison, and you are lucky to have him as your economic development guy. And he put together some really, really good information. He's just, right down the middle, and good information that people can rely on to make a decision.
Red team.
Just another comment. So someone asked about the values. Loudoun County, which is home of the largest, nearly 200 data centers. There has been studies there, but again, these data centers are older and newer. But they found in their study if you're within a half a mile, you may take up to a 2.8% decrease in the value of your home. However, recent studies showing with the new data centers, very little, if any. AI, if you spend the extra $20 or $100, you get a lot more.
Yep.
This is crazy. The more money you spend, the better answer you get.
It's true. Supervisor Gores, you have the floor.
Yeah, I would like to know if there's, do these centers have to be above ground all the time, or can they be underground a little bit or at all, or?
Well, that's a good question. I've never gotten that question before. I don't think that they could be below ground. I'd have to look into that, but I've never heard of one being below ground. That's an interesting question.
Mark will research
I give you a credit. That's a brand new one. That's good. That's good.
You get a star, Jim. Good job.
It would be less sightly. That's one thing. I get a star. Oh man.
Do you want me to call Sally? You don't want to start running a chainsaw here, Supervisor Gores, okay?
No.
All right. Anybody else on the white team? Blue team, Supervisor Wentz. I know you've got more questions.
This might be very nuts and bolts, but in terms of a county's approach or its leverage, I suppose, in being able to weigh in on usages, things like that, does the would a county have the authority or the ability to specify certain design considerations? Like, if you're going to put your data center here, it has to be, have the dry, whatever it is, the open or closed loop cooling system. Or you have to, make sure that, light pollution isn't spread. Can we specify those things? Or a county, not necessarily Barron, but can a county do that?
Well, it's a good question. This is going to be a Rebecca question. But it's a fine line, right, between creating the structure and framework within which an industry, a business, or an individual can conduct their affairs, and specifically telling someone exactly how they're going to live their life. That's a fine line. Now, we also have, it's very, very common, it's everywhere in this state, conditional use permit, right? Very specific. So that's a Rebecca question, which she will address. I suspect there are some things that we can do. Now, you can ask for anything, but can you make it? Can you place conditions on exactly what you want? That's going to be a limit. That Rebecca can perhaps address that. I'm not even sure if she has the answer today, but we'll see. It's a good question. Now, I mean, if you say, I mean, here's one. Let me give you a ridiculous example. You can have your business, but you have to make sure that all the employees get 17-minute breaks every day at 1 o'clock. You can't do that. Now you're telling people how to run their business. Or you can build your development, but I want everybody in the development to have dinner at 6:15. Well, that's ridiculous. You can't tell people how to live their life or how to run their business. But can you do certain things? Certain things. Where is that line? That's for an attorney.
All right, to the assembly, I'm going to step out here. We've been at this an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm wondering if a break is necessary. So I really have a two-part question for the board. Are we close to a few more questions and then a break, or are we at a break? What would be the preference? I don't want to cut anybody off, because that's what we have, no time limit. That's the beauty of a committee of the whole. We're going to stay here till we get the questions answered. But do we need to make our bladders gladder, or what do we need to do here? Question. Okay, so I'm going to go around the room. Questions from the red team.
I'm going to just use one more comment. So Quick Trip, for the people that are concerned about them just plopping in, Quick Trip just doesn't show up and build. There's a lot of study and access. These data centers already know if there's a site in Barron County that best suits their needs because of the cost of construction, lines, and placement. Just like solar farms that come to the county had to be sited by MISO. They already knew those spots. So it's the same thing. If you have a sand mine, a substation that's not being used, probably likely that's going to be looked at far before they come and knock on your door and you're in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. Any other comments from the red team? White? Blue? I'm going to state that we've received no other questions from the assembly, so I am going to, with the permission, all those in favor of taking do you want a 10 or 15-minute break?
10.
10. All those in favor of a 10-minute break from the Board of Supervisors, raise your right hand. We're going to take a 10-minute break. My clock says 2:44. We will start promptly in 10 minutes. Pull the Barron County Board of Supervisors back into session. Give me just a minute to get my files organized here. We have completed section 6C1 with Mr. O'Connell finishing his presentation, and I'll declare that the questions from the board have ceased for him. So at this time, I am going to introduce Attorney Rebecca Roker from Atollas Law and let her give her presentation on the potential ordinance that would be the underlie the moratorium. So with that, Rebecca, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Rebecca Roker from Atollas Law. You're probably more familiar with my partner, Andy Phillips, who's also General Counsel for WCA. So it's great to be here in person and to see all of you. I'm going to piggyback off of Mark's presentation a little bit. He started with this is the hot topic, not only in the community, but also on a statewide and nationwide basis. And given that data centers are such a new hot topic, we as lawyers have to view the regulation of data centers through the old lens of existing law. And so some of the challenges that Andy and I and our partners at Atollas face is how do we utilize existing law to regulate these things, data centers, that are so new and present very unique impacts. And I'm going to get into more detail on how and why the county may want to regulate those particular impacts. But I think it's from a big picture standpoint, don't underestimate the challenge that each of you are facing in working within your statutory authority as a county and using that statutory authority to address a very new and emergent issue. So again, to piggyback on something Mark said, in terms of when you are crafting your ordinances, and the no picking of winners or losers, I love that phrase because it's a really nice way to explain the concept of equal protection and the constitutional protections of the constitutional protection of due process under the law and equal protection under the law. And so when you're developing your ordinances, or when you have any matter come before you or the zoning committee or any body, you have to ensure that due process and equal protection are granted to that applicant. And so when you're developing your ordinances or whatever, if you decide to regulate data centers, keep that in mind, that we have to ensure that not only are you operating in your statutory authority, but you're also operating in such a way that passes constitutional muster. Again, to piggyback off of what Mark said, thank you, Mark. Talking about some of the pros and cons, there's a few of the pros and cons that Mark hit on that really underscore some of the particular legal issues. And as I've said before, and Andy and I always joke, like, how many times do we say our statutory authority under Chapter 59? Probably at least 10 times when we do a presentation, or you can't do anything that you don't have authority to do. That's another one we say all the time. But the same applies here for data center regulation or any regulation that the county may want to adopt. You can only do what Chapter 59 or the other words in the law allows you to do. That's where counties are different than other governmental bodies. And so when we're looking at the pros and the cons, the first question becomes, what can you regulate? And so a lot of the issues that Mark touched on, such as noise, dust, impact on roads, potential size, those fall within the county's statutory authority under Chapter 5969, which is your zoning authority. But things like water usage or power usage, or those more, I'll say large-scale impacts, those you do not have statutory authority to regulate. Now, we can look to other resources, particularly as we're talking about a local agreement, to build in protections for those issues. But again, always keep in mind that when you're developing an ordinance, you have to look at it through the lens of what can we do as a county under our statutory authority. Okay. Couple other items on the pros and cons. I wanted to touch on the NDA and the non-disclosure agreements that certainly come under public scrutiny, because we as a governmental body have an obligation for open and transparent government. That's built into our state law. And it is really codified in Chapter 19, which includes our open records law and our public records law. And so in the event that the county were to proceed with a development and the developer asked that the county enter into an NDA, I think you could, but it would still be subject to public records. If a developer said, no, it's accepted under Chapter 19 and therefore the county can't disclose it, that is a whole other set of issues in determining whether that exception to the obligation to disclose a public record would apply. And I think that I can speak for Andy, if you were ever asked to enter into an NDA and it's something that you wanted to pursue, that we would demand that a developer indemnify the county for any cost of having to process or defend their decisions under the public records law. You know, that is absolutely something that becomes imperative. And again, as to what Mark indicated, NDAs are very important in the private sector. They can be very important in the public sector also, particularly if we're talking about negotiating from the county's position in making sure that negotiations are protecting the county. But again, we always have to view that through the lens of what state law requires for public records. So if you hear of a community or a municipality that is taking a bright line like, nope, we can't disclose, there most likely is some other public records issue, or there at least should be that public records analysis at play. All right. Oh, very briefly on the lawsuits that Mark mentioned, the tariff matter involving We Energies and the PSC order, that is currently in front of the Ozaukee County Circuit Court because it's an appeal of a PSC decision. It has not gone far yet. I would assume that it's going to continue through the process. And then with respect to the Mount Pleasant case, that's a fascinating case from a legal perspective because it was brought by 3 property owners as a private nuisance and negligence claim directly against Microsoft. And so that is very much in the early stages as well. So we don't know how this case is going to play out. And really the issue is, does a private landowner have a private cause of action against a company for impacts of a development on their quality of life? And does that rise to the level of negligence that is compensable under the law? So that's a very fascinating case. Fortunately, the counties in that area have not been named in that lawsuit. I don't think well, we'll wait to see if they are. There's no indication at this point that they will be named because it is that private cause of action on behalf of the landowner against the developer. And that case, interestingly, is in federal court. It was brought in the 7th Circuit, the Eastern District of Wisconsin of the 7th Circuit. So we will keep monitoring that case as well. So all of these issues really lead up to the question of what can Barron County do? We talked about the statutory authority requirement. We talked about some of the issues that arise in the pros and cons. So what can you do? Again, I think this is time number 4. You can only do what the statutes allow you to do. You You can only do what you have authorization to do under Chapter 59 or anywhere else under the law. And so what you have in front of you, or what was in the agenda packet, is that temporary moratorium on data center development. And there are certain restrictions in the Wisconsin statutes on whether a county may adopt a moratorium. Development moratorium are addressed in Chapter 66, 66.1002. That interestingly accepts counties out. So we have a different playbook that we have to follow. Chapter 59, 5969, I believe it's sub 4, allows the county to adopt a moratorium if there are very limited, if it falls within very limited parameters. And the question or comment was made before that a moratorium may be appropriate, but it absolutely should not be a tool to either kick the can down the road and decide to regulate later or to stop a development. And that's what we see at times on a statewide level, where a municipality will adopt a moratorium in an attempt to get a developer to look elsewhere. And that's not specifically with respect to data centers. We see that with other types of development as well. But as legal counsel, we would advise you that your any moratorium has to be very narrowly defined and has to fall within your authority under Chapter 59. So what you have in front of you is just that. So we, Andy and I developed this draft moratorium using your statutory authority in Chapter 59 as the baseline. And again, because we can only regulate what we can under Chapter 59, it is a zoning ordinance. And so therefore it would apply in areas of Barron County that are unincorporated and are subject to county zoning. So that's one really important distinction to make, that should Barron County adopt a data center ordinance, it is not going to be a county-wide ordinance per se. It is only going to apply in those unincorporated areas because, again, it's being adopted under your zoning authority. The second reason that's really important is because the county can only adopt a moratorium for a zoning matter. There may be other outlying exceptions to that rule, but again, because your authority to adopt a moratorium comes from 5969, which is your zoning authority, from our perspective, the easiest rule of thumb is a moratorium should only be adopted for a zoning regulation. And so the purpose of adopting a moratorium is really to put a pause, to do the investigation, do the research, do the development and the drafting of a particular ordinance that meets the policy goals of the county. And based on the information in the packet, it's clear that the county has already done a lot of that research and a lot of that information gathering and even a lot of the investigation. But I think that that is what tees up your development moratorium for a very strong position, because you're not coming out and saying, you know what, we're starting 100% fresh. We've got to put a 2-year time limit on this. We don't know anything. The fact that you've already researched these issues and you know what issues need to be addressed in greater detail, I think really works in the county's benefit, and would be, if I had to legally defend your development moratorium ordinance, that would definitely be in the pro category. One other quick final point on the moratorium, that is an ordinance. And so under the law, a moratorium must be adopted by a county as an ordinance. So if you hear, other municipalities or counties throughout the state that are taking action on a development moratorium or a data center moratorium, and they're doing it by resolution, they did not consult Atolis first. Because for a county, you must do it by resolution. We think that that's a very clear, definitive answer in the law. Let's see. Trying to see. Oh, I also wanted to touch on two other issues. I might be backpedaling a little bit to circle back to what Mark talked about. But these are two issues that you can also address within the time frame of your development moratorium on data centers, is the particular issues of citing that you do have authority to address under Chapter 59, one of them being cropland and prime agricultural lands being used for development. Now, there are some statewide statutory restrictions that preempt county regulation, but certainly the zoning categories of, the prime ag land or the relationship between or any agreements between the county and DADCAP for those enterprise areas. Those are certainly things that you can explore as you develop an ordinance, a data center regulatory ordinance. And then again, other items that are ripe for county regulation, things like noise suppression, landscaping, berms, dust, light pollution. We often get the question of the size and the magnitude of some of these projects. Well, how can we, I'll just say, no one from Barron County has asked this question, but how can we stop this 1 million square foot project? And it's really hard to define a data center in such a way that we're talking just about a data center. And it comes back to the the choosing of winners and losers. Because in a lot of ways, how is a data center different than an Amazon distribution center? Yes, there may be the factors of water consumption or water usage, energy consumption, things of that nature. But keep in mind, those don't fall within the county's regulatory authority. So we have to look to what is it that you're going to be regulating, how and what basis you have for those whats, and then how we're going to build those into an ordinance. Then with respect to local agreements are really a fantastic tool for the county because A, you have statutory authority to do them, and they really truly are an arm's length agreement. So when you are negotiating with a data center developer or a solar developer or other developers, you can ask for things that you may not have explicit statutory authority to regulate, say within a conditional use process. So for example, requiring an environmental study, as the question was asked before, either an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. Those are the threshold environmental tests used at the state level whenever there is a significant state action. You could potentially build into your local agreement that an environmental assessment must be completed. Now, again, that's an arm's length negotiation, so the developers may say, no, go pound sand, we're not doing that for the county. But that is certainly something that you could ask for within the context of that local agreement. Other items that Andy and I feel are so important to flush out in those local agreements are things like emergency response, particularly, in your community when you have a lot of volunteer first responders. So those types of issues, training, and then again, roads, what are the impact on the roads, not only mainly for the construction equipment coming in. You've got all these construction workers coming in. What's the impact on the roads or the traffic patterns? Items like that may be addressed in a local agreement. And then, just again, it can be, I don't want to say a wish list because it certainly should be reasonable, but there are things that counties have asked for within the context of a development agreement that, right away seem like, kind of absurd. For example, a county and local first responders may need a specific fire truck to be able to go up to a certain level to suppress a fire that's created, or that the technology is required in order to properly suppress that fire. They need a really high boom lift. And so that's something in a local agreement that was worked in that the developer paid for. Again, off the top of my head, it sounds pretty extreme, like, hey, we get a new, emergency response truck. But again, because it was rooted in a justifiable basis, they needed to have that specialized equipment in order to perform their duty, i.e. Provide emergency responses. Last item I wanted to touch on, of course, and we'll open it up to questions, with respect to the property tax issue and if a data center developer, from what I understand, just based on the comments, it sounds like the data center would structure its transaction in such a way that it would just lease the property, and then therefore it wouldn't own the real property. And so what would be taxed is the improvement that's built on that footprint. There was a recent change under Act 12 in the statutes that modified the taxation of certain personal properties, buildings, fixtures, and improvements that were previously taxed as personal property. Now they are taxed as real property. And the basis that I've encountered this is with respect to airport hangars, because those sit on top of the land, and then they are technically, or they were categorized for tax purposes as personal property. Well, now they're being taxed as part of the real property. So Andy has been very involved with many groups throughout the state for trailer legislation to fix some of the errors and some of the complications in that bill. But I just wanted you to be aware of that if there is a threshold concern of we don't want to have a data center come to Barron County because of this tax issue, there may be several other elements that need to be looked at in play. And I'm not familiar with the Dunn County example, so I can't speak to that. But again, just wanted to mention Act 12 and the updates to the statutes on those property tax assessment issues. All right.
You ready for questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we'll go this way. We'll go blue team first. You get to ask Rebecca questions. We'll start with the blue team. Supervisor Turcott.
Again, thank you for taking the time to come up here. My question would be to municipalities, townships that already have buildings of magnitude on them that could be a commercial farm. Can you put a moratorium to stop something else? And the other example would be Lakeland Township, where the steel plant put up a ginormous building. Can you now limit it, or are you picking winners and losers?
Excuse me, I might have to kick it over to your corporation counsel if I lost my voice. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Can you help me understand the question a little bit better? Is it whether the county could adopt a moratorium on redevelopment of certain properties, like certain commercial properties?
If they're looking at putting, some of the townships, like Lakeland Township, I believe, passed a moratorium. And, but they've allowed, a few years ago, a steel plant to put up I think a 200,000 square foot manufacturing plant. Are you now being able to put a moratorium in to stifle something else?
Okay, I think I understand your question better. That's a great question. Excuse me. And I can't speak, as obviously as legal counsel for the town. And I haven't reviewed the town of Lakeland's moratorium ordinance. But what I can say is your development moratorium ordinance should be structured in such a way that it's very specific. So if I were to put my hat on as counsel for the town, and we had that specific parcel at issue, I would, if you call that parcel out, it would have to be in a very particularized manner. So you are not specifically targeting that parcel. And you'd have to do some creative drafting, which, legally appropriate creative drafting, to really hone in on what the specific issue is that needs to be further investigated and further studied during that term of the moratorium.
Other questions? Supervisor Oki.
Right now, there's 4 townships that have set up moratoriums, and 2 that are not part of Barron County zoning. That would be the town of Lakeland and the town of Dover. There are 2 other ones that are part of county zoning, town of Maple Plain and town of Doyle. How, if we passed a moratorium like you have outlined here, what is the effect on the, basically the unzoned versus the zoned towns?
That is a great question. And to put it simply, the moratorium would not apply to the 2 towns that are not subject to county zoning. So I think you said Lakeland and Dover.
Which Supervisor Vaughn happens to be the chair of the town of Dover.
Awesome. So because those 2 townships have not opted into county zoning under 5969, because this development moratorium is a zoning ordinance, it would not apply in those 2 townships. Now, if there are other townships that have adopted moratoria on data centers, whether or how the structure of the application really depends on the terms of what their moratorium says. And I apologize, I haven't reviewed those, so I can't speak to those. But again, if the county were to proceed with a moratorium as set forth, in your agenda packet, again, it would apply into those unincorporated areas that are subject to county zoning. And so even if one of those townships had adopted their own moratorium, the counties would still apply.
Other questions? Supervisor Vaughn?
You reference the county's authority to regulate often. Is the town's authority to regulate similar items, or are there differences in what they can regulate?
There are differences because, and it also depends too on whether a town has adopted village zoning authority under Chapter 60. So if a town has adopted village authority, their zoning powers immediately become broader, and they fall within, that township then falls within the municipal structure and municipal authority for zoning, which is broader than a county's authority, certainly.
Other questions? Seeing and hearing none, we'll proceed on to the white team. Seeing and hearing none, over to the red team. Supervisor Fowler.
Thank you for being here and appreciate all the information. Just a question about the NDAs. Is there a way a company then could work with the Economic Development Corporation in the county that's not regulated by the county? Could they work through the NDAs that way and then have the...
Oh, I see. So essentially get around the public records law?
Correct.
Potentially. Certain entities, depending on how they are structured, so certain economic development entities may also be subject to public records. So for the first question would be, is that entity subject to Chapter 19 and therefore has to disclose public records? Let's say for argument's sake, it's not. So then, no, that entity would not have to disclose those documents as a public record. But then I would question to what extent would those documents be pertaining to the county's work? Because if the county was going to be taking action, obviously those documents would need to come to the county at some point. So maybe early in the process, there could be some avoidance of public records disclosure, but certainly, moving forward, the county would have to comply.
Other questions? Supervisor Cook? Yes, you are.
So the moratorium, the one that is presented.
Please use your mic, please. We turn it on, please.
In the moratorium, or this temporary moratorium that is presented here, and in reading that, the zoning committee would then, two questions really. Why would it not come out of the zoning committee, but if the moratorium is passed, the zoning committee then goes to work on a full-fledged ordinance pertaining to data centers actually being built?
Yes, if the moratorium is adopted, whomever is, the appointed authorities within this ordinance are then directed by the county board to do this deeper investigatory work. So it could be addressing all of the issues that many have raised via questions today. It may be looking at other sample ordinances. What do we want to use from other communities, other counties that have developed data center regulatory ordinances? And so that's really oftentimes where the bulk, the meat of the work is done. Oftentimes it's through the zoning and planning administrator, and then working with your county administrator as like a team, and then it's presented to a zoning committee. So it will certainly go through, or the issue of whether to adopt, and with an eye pointing towards adopting some regulation, there's a whole lot of work that goes into that.
And would those public meetings be held through the zoning or through the county board?
Those, I believe, would be you could structure it any way you want to.
Because typically they would go through the zoning committee.
Yeah, because the zoning committee is really going to be the committee of jurisdiction, if you will, because it's going to be a zoning ordinance. So it would absolutely be appropriate to have them at the zoning committee.
May I jump in and get clarification? Because Supervisor Cook has kind of hit on something. So is this, I'm going to rephrase it from you, that board supervisors that either talked to me or called me. So is this a two-step process? And I'm trying to rephrase questions. So is it appropriate, Rebecca, potentially the moratorium is enacted upon by the county board on October 19th. That sets forth the breathing space. So then is the moratorium, as you've printed and presented in the packet, could be voted upon on October 19th. Then that gives the zoning committee the time to work on the details, and then they bring back what goes into the zoning ordinance. Is that correct? Or is it, is that wrong?
No, that's correct from the steps 2, 3, 4 process.
Okay.
Would you have the development moratorium come from your zoning committee as a recommendation, then go to the county board in October?
I'm not getting that sense from the board members that have talked to me. They'd like to do it where, okay, we'll put the moratorium in place, then refer it to the zoning committee and give them the moratorium time to work on whatever, and then bring back all their work back to the county board. That allows our new land services director to be involved, to do the research, to publicly post the public meeting notices so people can come and talk to that group of 5. That way we're building to get to the end game, which is, some of the controls you're talking about. That's the feedback I've gotten from the 3 or 4 board supervisors that talk to me.
And that is absolutely what I would recommend for that end game, that end point ordinance. Absolutely.
Supervisor Cook, does that help kind of explain some of the questions you?
Well, I understand the process. I just want to clarify that should be the process.
That's up to you.
Once you have a need for an ordinance, yes,
Oh, can I ask something about that? You know,
Well,
okay, all right, then
let's
I'll
just,
wait.
Let's just let, let's let
we'll get-
Supervisor Cook has the floor. I'm just asking the Supervisor.
No, I would
Hold it,
give
let's-
him leeway.
All right, you'll yield?
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor Cook, excuse me, Supervisor Cook is yielding the floor to Supervisor Oki. So I'm going to recognize Supervisor Oki at this time.
Okay, so, you know, again, I'm trying to get us as supervisors educated and do what's right for Barron County. Today was a very good start for that. I believe the 29th is, and any work we want to do on our own. But if it does come to, let's just say, I want to wait at least until October's board meeting, which I think you said is whenever
It's
it is.
October 19th at 5 p.m., this
yeah.
built room.
If, you know, we'll be voting, let's just say, on whether we want to have a moratorium or not. There may be some of us that say, geez, based on the information, I think we ought to explore data centers. Then there may be somebody that said, I don't ever want a data center here, but I got to be careful how we structure the moratorium, that realizing it's just temporary. And then there may be the ones in the middle that say, yeah, let's really do the moratorium to do fact finding more than we have already. And it has to go through zoning, but does it have to, could there be a zoning looking at it and an ad hoc committee to do all the fact finding, or does it have to be the zoning?
No, you can certainly have, if you wanted to have a specific ad hoc committee overseeing that investigation, you could do so.
I'm just thinking this thing, and please don't take anything personal, anybody, but, you know, Mike Judy, LE, Local Emergency Planning Committee, he might be very helpful on this. Fran, who knows this stuff. Randy, it might come to you, you know, I like your intelligence, but, you know, you are the board president of a utility. There could be somebody saying you shouldn't be on that, you know. So I'm just throwing this out. Please don't, you know, these are the things I want to just talk about here when we get down the road. So I'm just giving you things to think about.
Okay, Supervisor Cook, you have the floor.
I wish I went to relinquish any time, Chairman.
Well,
No,
sir,
I'm
the
good.
floor is yours, sir.
No, I'm good till the next round.
Okay, so he's yielded the floor. Supervisor and
So on that point, I mean, when you consider the moratorium, that second part is important. The second part being, and then we're going to examine, you know, do the work on what happens after the moratorium. Because if you don't do the second part, you don't have a moratorium, you just have a ban.
Right.
And that's much different. And that's where we run into potential trouble. So that second part really is important. So if you're gonna do that, you need to do the second part too.
In fact, the first part gives you time to do the second part. It's the only reason that I would even consider doing it.
Right.
But yeah.
And Supervisor Cook, in deference to your comments to me before, we have not had public comment yet. It's incumbent upon ourselves to hear from the public before we put this moratorium in place.
I agree.
Supervisor Anderson, you have the floor.
I do, thank you. You mentioned something about land that's leased. So would the property owner still be responsible for property taxes if it's leased?
Sure.
Yes. Depending on the terms of the lease agreement, but an owner certainly is still responsible for or to ensure that property taxes are paid, whether that obligation is shifted to, you know, the lessee. It depends on the structure of the lease agreement.
And then would it change what it falls into, like the different, because this data center's there, now it's not ag land? Would it change what would be the right, like the
Classification?
Right, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I would think so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, it's a very simple way. It's kind of like an apartment building. The apartment building owner owes property taxes. I mean, a person who leases the apartment, it's paid in their rent. But if they move out or don't pay the rent, apartment building owner still has to pay taxes. Kind of the same thing.
All right. Supervisor Efforts, you have the floor.
But then unless the law is changed, if if it's the trailers or the shipping containers that have that's the improvement on it, there wouldn't be taxes paid on the improvements, just the land,
No, right now.
if it's leased.
Well, right now, under Act 12, if it meets the definition of a building improvement or fixture. So again, I like the airport hangar example. You have a structure that is placed on a footprint, but that footprint of land is leased. That structure, i.e. the airport hangar, is then taxed as real property.
Okay.
So again, depending on what the data center development looks like, I would anticipate that whatever is built is going to certainly meet the definition of a building improvement or fixture.
Okay.
So it would fall within those parameters of Act 12.
A question, if I may interrupt, for Mr. O'Connell and you, Rebecca. Let's ferret out this question. I think it keeps coming up. If we follow this two-step process, the moratorium, and then we refer it, would it not incumbent be upon the subcommittee it is assigned to get somebody from the Department of Revenue and say, tell us what happens? Are we going to get revenue if it's just leasehold or it's movable? Tell us that.
Absolutely.
And explain that to us, because that should come back to the county board ultimately, because they set the budget. It's not a committee that sets the budget, the county board sets, correct? Under
Absolutely.
6590, it's the board sets the budget. They should know that, because you could have 10 movable data centers and you get 0. Why would a board vote for that?
Right.
Okay.
No, absolutely. That's the kind of issue that should be talked about
Okay.
during the investigation period. Sorry.
I agree. If you move down that path, then you definitely want to get a definitive answer from the Department of Revenue.
And I think that's where, just to clarify, and so the board knows, I think that's where our new land services director, Mr. Cole, myself could work together. If we have a finance director, Connie, is that then not incumbent upon staff to research and present back? Then the committee makes recommendations and decisions.
Yes, and I would, if you're asking me?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, and from where, I would also suggest that if you were in conversations, your economic development person, let's say, would be saying to potential developers, these are the kinds of data centers we're interested in, not the mobile type data center that does not provide benefit to the local jurisdictions, but a permanent data center that provides long-term good corporate citizen benefits to the citizens of Barron County.
And employment in that.
And employment.
Okay.
That would be, you'd want to make that quite clear.
All right, we're still on the red group. So Supervisor Cook, let me go to Supervisor Gores, and then I'll come back to you. Supervisor Gores.
If there, a moratorium is voted on or put in place, is there a set time limit, or do we make the time limit?
Right now, in the draft, there is a time limit.
Okay.
Yes, there are two. There's 3 different spots, Supervisor Gores. I modified the first one to be until 12/31 of 2027. That's feedback that I received from board members saying, I don't like 9 months. I don't think that's enough time. And some board members have said to me, I want a definite date when it ends. Now, it can be extended, because is it 9 months from enactment? Is it 9 months plus 10 days for publication? That's why I inserted. And so we could modify, we could, whatever time the lawyers recommend, I guess, but that's why I did that.
And I would say from a recommendation standpoint, certainly be realistic, but keep it as concise as possible, i.e. as short as possible. But again, you've got the work that you've already identified today, and the work that staff has already identified as potential issues, as a roadmap of the work that would be done during your moratorium. So I think, that the date that Mr. French put out is legally defensible. But again, be very careful if you go longer, because then a court may construe that as simply an attempt to a 2-year ban, rather than a true good faith investigation of how to develop an ordinance.
Supervisor Cook, you had another question.
Well, again, our temporary moratorium, if we choose to go that route, should only be given us the time to actually put together a moratorium. And if that takes more than or an ordinance, excuse me, zoning ordinance, then that we can have a discussion about. But just to the point of this purchase, to put it to bed, all 6 are purchased by the company. Mount Pleasant, the village sold 350 acres, the initial 350 acres to Microsoft for $50 million. Now, I think that had an impact on their property taxes in that village, and they have subsequently purchased another 2,000 acres around that site. So they are going to pay property taxes unless you create some type of district that allows them not to for a certain period of time. They are, in fact, going to purchase the land. These trailers, these little cargo containers, China boxes, if you will, are not quote unquote the data centers we're talking about. And in fact, some moratoriums actually, if you exceed a certain size, the moratorium applies. I think Madison's, if I looked at it right, if it was under 20,000 square feet, then it was not impacted, which is about the size of Eau Claire that they're talking about, the data center in Eau Claire.
All right, we're going to go on. Go
Can I
ahead.
just speak to that? Just briefly, the restriction on a development moratorium that's in Chapter 66, again, that doesn't apply to counties. And so the rules that a city, village, town may adopt for a development moratorium do not apply to the county. To the extent that you are not referenced in Chapter 66. However, again, you do have the authority in Chapter 59, and then there's very specific parameters of how you may adopt that moratorium. And so those are built into this draft that you have in front of you. But again, it's a delicate balance between the statutory authority, statutory restrictions, and then the case law that accompanies those statutes.
All right, we're going to bump over to the blue team. Any questions? All right, Supervisor Wenzel.
I'm going to go back to the leverage issue. At what point, you said that you're looking at 2027 December until 2027. What is the shortest amount of time that we would need to do that sort of investigating, that we need to do the fact finding so that we can still have advantage, like you said, before people start just welcoming these things in, and then we're out? And maybe that question is for you, Jeff, or Louis.
That's a question for Ben. Ben, how long would we have to have a public notice even to turn, I mean, how much time do you want? Would you please come to a mic, to maybe use Supervisor Kuslick's and Mike and turn that on, please?
So, yeah, once the wording on the moratorium is determined that it's sufficient, we would need, it would be a Class 2 notification. We would need the 2 weeks. We would need 2 weeks of notice in local papers to let the constituents know and have the public hearings. So as we sit right now, October would be pushing it, but I think we could get it done.
I guess to clarify, I meant the moratorium being shorter, like 6 or 9 months.
Certainly, we could do it, we could do shorter. If he's willing to kind of drop some of his other work. I mean, he's new in his job and he's learning his job, you know, and how fast can that committee, I mean, if that committee would want to meet every week on a Tuesday and go chug through it, hooray.
And I can assure you, I have done my due diligence. I'm pretty near every day. I'm digging through recent updates on data centers and where most communities stand within the state. I've dug into Pennsylvania. It's a hot topic issue in Pennsylvania as well. And I know we've discussed West Virginia. They're diving in head first. I mean, they want all the data center revenue they can get. So it's a tightrope that we walk here in terms of restricting versus protecting our constituents.
Right.
If we do enact a moratorium that's good through December 31st of 2027, and we come to an agreement before that, once we enact an ordinance against, or not against, but regulating data centers, we can drop the moratorium.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I can partially answer that, or maybe add some information for you, Supervisor Wenzel. On Friday last week, the Wisconsin Counties Association Board of Directors did take up this issue and passed a template ordinance for consideration by counties, which will be released tomorrow. So that'll be available within 24 hours. Lots of flexibility in that ordinance. This is not a recommendation. It is a template for counties to start if they wanted to move forward. They don't have to. They may not want to. That's fine. But we had so many requests from counties for a starting place. So we worked with all sorts of parties on this issue and Atolis Law to put together a template ordinance that people like Ben can start with and committees could start with as they move about this process. That might be, that's, I guess, some kind of an answer to say, it may not take as long as you might think if you have a starting place, so you don't have to do a lot of work in advance, but maybe it's not really fill in the blank, but it's address certain issues because there's many options to look at. But that might be a place that you could start.
If I can just follow up, when that template is released, you will see a whole lot of fill in the blanks, and that's intentional because it is to be customized by each county. But again, as Mark said, it's intended to be a starting point. And then certainly all of the unique topics that we've talked about today, those can be added to the template and you can really customize it and make it your own. But again, it's just intended to give counties a jump start and a launching off point for all of those particular considerations. And again, those considerations that do indeed fall within your authority.
Supervisor Vaughn, you asked a question. You have the floor.
Thank you. So in the packet where we're looking at the actual moratorium, on page 3, it has 2 different dates. It has the 9-month and then it has the one that we mentioned at the end of 2027. So is that for 2 different things? Are we just not sure on the time frame?
I did that as a placeholder because of all the information I was getting before talking to Chair Oki about having this meeting. I did that, Supervisor Vaughn, so that I reminded myself if I got this question why I put that in there. And I put it in there because I've been asked, is 9 months too long? Is it too short? And I also had some people and citizens and supervisors say, I'd rather have a definitive date when it ends. That's it. And that's why there's 3 different spots, it's 2 different places. That's why I did that. You can make a decision, absolutely. Faster is better with me too. I just didn't, Ben and I have been talking about this and we're just trying to get you to a date here. All right, blue team, anything else? Supervisor Wentz.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at wording this so it makes sense. Is there a sense of whether or not some of the town or village moratoriums are intended more to ban data center development or to allow time, as we've been talking about here at the county level, to develop their own local ordinances? I mean, I really don't have an idea of whether or not Lakeland or Doyle or Dover or wherever are trying to ban data centers outright by imposing moratoriums, or if they're doing the same thing we are or are expected to do.
It's both. It's both. I mean, some are intended to provide breathing space and time, and others are trying to be clever and just say moratorium, but what they really mean is ban. That's, I mean, and there are the developers that are going to look at those and say, we never intended to even talk with you anyway, so they'll just, it doesn't matter. But if they did intend to, there may be court issues because you shouldn't be passing a moratorium if your intention is to ban it. That's not good public policy and it's going to get you in trouble. So, but the answer is both. And not just in Wisconsin, by the way. It's all over the country. There have been public entities that have passed moratoria to provide time to think and breathing space. And there have been those all over the country that have passed moratoriums to just to ban it. And that will sometimes cause trouble, get them in trouble.
Rebecca, anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Again, blue team, you're up. Any questions from any other member of the blue team? Hearing none. White team, questions? Hearing none. Red team, questions? Supervisor Cook, I see you raising your hand.
Oh, I hate to ask so many questions, but in this moratorium, or excuse me, in our zoning ordinance, then that is where we would address things like water consumption.
Well, water,
No, well, when I say water, not water consumption, the type of cooling that we would like, for example, a closed loop or air.
I would say, just on a very high level, that is not something that would be
In our ordinance.
appropriately incorporated into your zoning ordinance.
Okay, and those
That
are the
would
questions that I would have
yeah, those
as a
would-
member of the zoning committee, who I may get thrown off because I supply electricity to your home. Anyway, I guess that's where I'm coming from. Is just what things can we look at in terms of, obviously the impact on our roads, those types of things. Who would pay for that? Obviously, I think the utility in terms of 100% of the infrastructure cost, that's already going to be solved. That's not the, but that's the questions or the types of questions I would hope that we would be able to have a framework for the ordinance that the zoning committee would draft.
Yeah, and to think of it, I think as Mark alluded to, any other building. So if you had a Walmart development come forward, what is it in your zoning code that you would be applying? It would be things, the siting factors. So size, noise, traffic, other impacts that fall under the zoning committee's authority. You'd be looking at those same items to build into the data center regulatory ordinance. Things like water consumption or the technology for
That they would
the
use,
water
not
loop.
necessarily how much they would use, but
Yeah,
yeah.
that is something you could ask for in a local agreement, because again, a local agreement is a arm's length transaction. And the developer may say, yeah, we're going to have a closed loop and we're fine with that. The issue becomes if they say, no, you can't prohibit the project from moving forward, because again, you don't have statutory authority to regulate the type of water system in the business. But again, within the context of the local agreement, you can ask for that. You can ask for things that you may not have statutory authority to ask for in a local agreement, which again is the beauty of those local agreements.
I guess if I was going to put it in plain English, when you have authority to, if it's something the county has authority over, okay, you can put that in an ordinance. But if you're going to tell a business or an individual how they're going to run their business or run their life, you probably can't put that in an ordinance. I mean, you can't tell somebody where they're going to put their cash registers or that they can only use credit cards and not cash. That's how they run their business. You can't tell them that. You can't tell people when they're going to wake up in the morning or that they can't use alarm clocks. I mean, that's how they run their life. You can't tell them that. So, but if the county has authority over it, fine, then you can put it in an ordinance. But if it's something about how they run their own operation, that's outside of our ability.
Okay, supervisor efforts.
So going off the water issue, if we can't regulate the technology that they use, so if there's wastewater, we have authority on how they get rid of it or what they do with it. Is that part of the environmental study or the assessment? Where does that come in so there's not like hot water being put wherever they want?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that comes up when there's a non-closed loop or not a dry cooling method. When it's a evaporative method, the municipal water supply or water treatment comes into play, and the question there is, can the municipal water treatment facility handle the volume of water?
Or if it's in a, I'm sorry, if it's in a township, I mean, we have wells, we have septic, you know, we have that sort of thing. We don't have water treatment. We have, you know,
Yeah.
so.
The question again will be, can it be handled? And if that is definitely a question. And so if it's going to be in a non-municipal water treatment operation, then there's going to have to be some sort of water treatment probably on site that is solely created for that data center operation. If it's going to be adjacent to a municipal governmental geographic boundary, then there may be infrastructure that needs to be built to connect it to the municipal water's treatment facility. And then the question would be, can the municipal water facility handle it? And that has to be worked out in advance. It's not simple. You can't just build the structure and then say, municipality, you have to handle it. I don't care if you have enough capacity or not, you have to handle it. That's not how it works. There has to be an agreement that it can be handled. So that is not one of those where, you know, too bad for the municipality, they have to take care of. No, that has to be addressed in advance. If it's outside of a municipal water treatment facility, there's going to have to be a treatment facility on site. Or if it's a dry cooling, that's an entirely different operation.
Supervisor Patty Anderson, you have the floor. Do you have a question? Okay. We're done with the red. We're back to blue. Blue team, you got a question. Supervisor Turcott.
Is there at some point where the DNR is going to have some say in this if it's in a township for stormwater retention? I would think with water discharging if it was the evaporation. So, I mean, they're going to have a say in it when all is said and done. So.
Yes, yeah. DNR is going to have something to say about it, sure. Yeah, there'll be likely some water permits of some sort, yes. Yep.
Supervisor Oki, you have the floor.
In the templates that WCA developed for us to use and modify, the local agreement, is that similar to the JDA like we have in the solar farms? So that's where we could put in the type of water cooling system we want. And if it didn't happen, we could say no at that point in time?
Yes. So the local agreement template that was approved by the WCA board is exactly that. It's a template. I will say it is based on Barron County's Maple Grove Solar. So I always give kudos to Barron County whenever I can, because that was that really became a model project for negotiation of agreements. It was specifically intended to apply to renewable energy projects. However, it can certainly be used for a data center or even another large scale because it addresses impacts of a larger scale project. But of course, needs to be customized for whatever the project at issue is.
Okay, thanks.
All right, it's blue team. Any more questions? White team questions. Supervisor Kuslik.
So I guess I have two questions, but you decide if you allow me to ask both of them. If a site is proposed by someone and it gets annexed into a municipality, county ordinances would go away, correct? On that project.
To the extent that the county doesn't have inherent jurisdiction. So for example, Shoreland. County always has shoreland jurisdiction, so shoreland ordinances would still apply.
But if it was annexed into a city, then
zoning would not.
There's no zoning. A zoning ordinance that tries to limit a data center might become null and void because it's now in a municipality.
Correct.
Okay. The other thought I have is that as we have all different opinions as 29 people, and we all might want more things into a JDA or a joint developers agreement or an NDA or whatever you want to call it, is the county in a spot where we can have a recommended things that we would like to see in one of those? Because we may not be the ones negotiating the JDA. It very well could be the municipality. So, I mean, instead of trying to tie it all into an ordinance that really isn't legally allowable, we can't really develop a checklist that says, no, any JDA has to have this, has to have this, has to have this, because we might walk away from a negotiation or get eliminated from a negotiation. But can we have a suggested list from a county board?
Yes, you could use the template that they've developed that's going to be released in the next 24 hours. That could be your checklist. I also got to say, Supervisor Kuslik, city administrators I work with, they'd be very excited for us to do some of the legwork for them and have a model template ordinance for them, because they're not going to want to take all the heat. You know, if we have something that they can use, they'd probably be a lot more appreciative. And I believe we can sometimes oppose annexation or write a letter against annexation, can't we? I mean, if there's a specific purpose, if they're doing it to thwart our ordinance, we should probably write a letter against the annexation.
There is an opportunity for you to object or be involved in that
And if they put it in a TIF or TID, we can vote against the TIF or TID. So there are some ways to at least try. So
in the end, is the siting of a facility of this sort a county issue, a city, village, or town issue? It's more of a city, village, or town issue than it is a county issue. That is just a fact of the matter. But it behooves a developer to try to have a good relationship with all governing jurisdictions, regardless of who's officially or formally in charge. So there might be an annexation, that's true. The city might be the lead on a particular project, that may be true too. But a developer, a smart developer, will want to have buy-in from all the governing jurisdictions to have peace and harmony to the extent possible with not only the governing jurisdictions, but with the citizenry of the area. And how will they get that? Joint development agreement, full explanation, full disclosure, transparency. That's how they will get it. So the wise developers know that, and we're finding that out more and more with placements of data centers that have been successful. So I would say you will definitely have a seat at the table.
May I chime in, Rebecca? Do you want to respond? I just thought something else. Supervisor Kuslik asked a very good question. I would say too, Supervisor Kuslik, that if what you hypothesize or hypothetically, we'd have control over the emergency response plan, because we're going to be so that would have to go through the LEPC. So we'd have some control there, and that's where we'd want to go back to Mr. O'Connell's comments, that we'd want buy-in. We want that developer to be a partner, and if and then if they're going to do mobile battery storage or they're going to do something like that, our training for the local fire departments then comes into place. So yes, we may not get it on zoning, but we might get it on ERP, which again goes back to charged on this road. I'd love to see us have an ERP ordinance too someday, because that gives us a little more teeth. It's all these things building on one another.
Well, I don't want to open up another hour of conversation, but on battery energy storage systems, where we are in a conversation with the Public Service Commission where there is I'm not sure if you'd actually call it a difference of opinion, but if battery energy storage systems are on the same geographic footprint as a energy generation facility, then clearly it's under the Public Service Commission's jurisdiction. But if it is separate from that, then it is our opinion, and the opinion of Otolis law, that that is not under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. That falls under local government zoning. And we have a case in Kenosha County where we are in conversation to clarify this. So that is a separate issue, and to Mr. French's point, we care an awful lot about that. Now, Legislature may change that in the future, and Public Service Commission might want jurisdiction, but until the law is changed, to us, it's quite clear. That is not the jurisdiction of Public Service Commission, but rather the jurisdiction of local governmental entities. And so we care about that element of energy and battery storage systems until such time as something changes.
Very good. Other questions from white team members? Red team? I hear none. Blue team, questions? Back to white? Back to red. Okay, just want to make sure now, any further questions before we then get into the next kind of item of business here, and that's a rise and report, which I'm going to, if there's nothing, so I will go back then to Robert's Rules of Order. So exiting and reporting back to the assembly. This is where and it's in our agenda. We've asked, we're on 6E now. We've finished with 6D, questions from board members, a motion to rise and report, and this is a possible action item. Because when we exit the committee of the whole should report back to the assembly, which is the county board, what you've discussed, or more importantly, what's the action that you would like to take. I'm going to throw out there's many that could happen, but here's one of the rise and reports that could be stated. Could state that the Barron County Board of Supervisors, meeting as a committee of the whole, recommends the moratorium ordinance on data centers be placed upon the agenda for consideration at the October 19th, 5 p.m. county board meeting. That would then put the moratorium in front of the assembly, which is the county board, to vote up and down. It would allow people to go to the meeting on the 29th and learn more. And also what's been brought up, and I'm going to reach out to the local electric co-op because there's a very good question. This opened the door. Where's the power supply? I mean, if the power supply is here and it's here and if this is the maximum and we're using here, we don't have any room. Explain to us from the local co-op standpoint, representing most of Barron County, what that could mean. So that should be a question that really, in my opinion, as county administrator, should be answered on the 19th. So that's where we're at. Took a little detour there. So then once there's a rise and report, we end. Then we reconvene. Mr. Oki takes the chair. Somebody would read to him what the rise and report is, and then there'd be a motion to adopt that, and then we adjourn. So what's the will of the county board, or the will of the committee of the whole? No, it's got to be a formal motion. Then it can be something else, and it can be amended.
Well, I think, Jeff, what you read there in terms of coming out of
Committee of the whole.
Committee as a whole, and recommending that this be put on the agenda to be voted on up or down, gives us not only until October, it gives us September to also have some discussion among the board. And it gives I think it gives our zoning administrator a little time to get some footing under him and his staff to give us an idea about how long it would take to put a zoning ordinance together if in fact it looks like that's the direction we're going to go. And right now, I mean, he has, in my opinion, he has to do due diligence because he doesn't know, as if we were. I'm not saying we are, but anyway, so I would make that motion that you read as one of our options, the first one. I would make that motion.
So Supervisor Cook makes the motion, and I will read the whole thing. What I would do, Supervisor Cook, is I would read this sentence to Chair Oki. Chair Oki, the committee of the whole has completed its work and reports the following, period. The Barron County Board of Supervisors, meeting as a committee of the whole, recommends the moratorium ordinance on data centers be placed upon the agenda for consideration at the October 19th, 5 p.m. county board meeting. Is that your motion?
Yes.
There's a motion by Supervisor Cook. Is there a second? There's a second by Supervisor Patty Anderson. Discussion before we close out our committee of the whole. I hear no discussion. I hear no amendments. All those in favor of the motion proposed by Supervisor Cook, seconded by Supervisor Anderson, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Yeah, sorry. Okay. One, two, three, four, five, yes. So it'd be 24 yes. I will state that it's 24 yes and no, and none opposed. Is that good for your records, Jess? Okay, so second, I would entertain a motion from one of the board supervisors to come out of committee of the whole and return to the assembly as a county board. Supervisor Fowler, Supervisor Heller makes the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We are now back as a county board. Chair Oki, you're in charge.
Just make one
All
comment.
right, so, yes, Mr. O'Connell. Hold it, Mr. O'Connell is asked to speak.
Can I just make one comment, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Okay. Probably should have made this in the committee of the whole. I've been your staff person for a long time, but I just wanted to comment that we've been here just a few hours talking about this issue. It has been incredibly respectful, rational, insightful, and it really is exactly how county boards should operate. And I am just in awe and admire how you conduct yourselves in Barron County. That is, you're a model for how debate on issues ought to occur. And it makes me so proud to work for you. Just my compliments. It's you hash things out. The questions are so thoughtful. It's rational conversation, and you are so respectful of each other. And it's Chairman, Mr. Chairman Oki and Mr. French, just so incredibly well done. You just, I'm just so proud to work for you. Thank you.
It's partially your fault. It's the way you conducted this meeting, both the presentations. You led us down the path the right way. You gave us the right information. So we thank you for that. And it is a great board. So Supervisor Olson?
And just really, I guess, a point of order. There's discussion of whether this is going to the zoning committee or an ad hoc committee. Has that question been resolved? And if it's ad hoc, how do we do that in terms of deciding to do that? That's just a question.
John, couldn't we decide that on the 19th? Couldn't we have to get those details, a little more time for the board to noodle on this?
You're going to be when it goes to the when we reconvene as full county board, there's going to be a motion. There's going to be the report from the committee of the whole, and then there's going to be a motion to adopt that and make that recommendation by the board to the zoning committee or the ad hoc committee. I think that's the time to do it, so we know what you're going to do before you leave here today.
Good point. There you are.
So we're going to do that on October 19th is what you're saying?
No, we're doing it today.
Oh.
You're going to be taking the chair back and reconvening the county board.
You
and
need
then
to
there's
come up here.
An action taken on what the committee of the whole reported to you.
Right.
So you're doing again what you just did, but you just did it as committee of the whole. Now you're going to do it as county board. That's the way your agenda is set up anyways.
Right. So Louis, what I need to do is I need to read this statement again to you because we're now back as the county board and you're the chair.
Okay.
So Chair Oki, the committee of the whole has completed its work and reports the following. Barron County Board of Supervisors, meeting as a committee of the whole, recommends the moratorium ordinance on data centers be placed upon the agenda for consideration at the October 19th, 5 p.m. County Board meeting. That is their motion to rise and report. I will tell you then, sir, that in my opinion, you are now on to item 7B, motion to adopt, modify, or reject the recommendation from the committee.
So Louis, you're correct. So what'll happen now is the board's going to vote to put it on the agenda for the 19th. So sometime between now and the 19th, you're going to decide, the county board's going to decide where to refer that to, who's going to take it up once the moratorium's in place, who's going to take up and typically it would go to the zoning committee because that's the committee of jurisdiction because it's going to be a zoning ordinance. That's the normal way, but that would be decided by the board as a whole. You can do it today, or you can do it on the 19th. Probably do it on the 19th because you don't know whether you're going to have a moratorium or not until that.
It's just what I was thinking, because we don't know if we're going to have that moratorium, and it also gives us more time to think about it. I mean, I made those comments about Supervisor Cook, but, you know, he does know a lot about this stuff, and, you know, I just trying to keep you out of trouble.
I appreciate that.
So,
And I would say too, I think this is something that we could put on the exec agenda to have a discussion by that body with regard, I mean, Audrey sits on that committee. She is our zoning chair. We can have a discussion about what that should look like.
and that's on September 9th. We moved it back a week, just
Right.
remember. Okay.
Yep. So that would be my recommendation, to just have at least a discussion on what it should look like.
Is that all right with you, Jeff?
Yes, I'll put it on there. I'm writing it down now.
Okay. Okay, so we have the motion that Jeff has said about 3 different times. So now we need somebody to make that motion.
Motion to, the appropriate motion would be you adopt it, you modify it. If you modify it, it takes a motion, what the specific modification is, that takes a motion, a second, and then approval. Then you go back to approve the main motion, or you reject it outright. So somebody needs
So
to.
somebody can just make a motion to adopt.
To adopt, that's correct.
Motion by Supervisor Bartlett, second by Supervisor Turcott. Is there any further discussion on that? Not, all is in favor of adopting the Committee of the Whole report, as Jeff has said several times, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion's carried. Thanks, everybody.
Now we adjourn.
Now, if there's no further, I guess, against it, by unanimous consent, we'll adjourn at 4:15. And thanks.